The divine message also contained elements of strategic guidance that would seem counterintuitive to human military thinking. These were not simply suggestions, but divinely ordained actions that would prove instrumental in their eventual victory. Deborah saw in these instructions the hand of God, turning what seemed like weaknesses into strengths, and what seemed like insurmountable obstacles into pathways to triumph. The divine strategy was designed to highlight God's power, to ensure that all glory would be ascribed to Him, and not to any human effort. As the revelation solidified within her, Deborah prepared herself for the daunting task ahead. The pronouncements she was to make, the instructions she was to convey, would need to be delivered with an authority that could only stem from a direct encounter with the divine. She would have to overcome the inherent challenges of rallying a disparate and disheartened people, convincing them to trust in a plan that defied their current realities. Her role was to be the conduit, the living embodiment of God's will for their deliverance. The weight of this calling was not just about the immediate battle, but about the future of Israel. It was about restoring their covenantal relationship with Yahweh, about reminding them of who they were in Him. Deborah understood that true liberation was not just about breaking physical chains, but about restoring their spiritual identity, their broken relationship with God. The divine imperative she had received was not merely a call to arms, but a call to faith, a call to return to the one who was their true strength and their ultimate deliverer. The details of the plan, imbued with divine wisdom, began to take shape in her mind, a testament to God's enduring faithfulness and His unwavering love for His chosen people. This was the beginning of the end of their oppression, a dawn breaking through the long night of their suffering, heralded by the voice of a prophetess, empowered by the will of God. The sun, still a pale disk struggling to pierce the morning haze, cast long, distorted shadows across the valley floor as Deborah's palm tree stood sentinel. Beneath its familiar fronds, the air was usually alive with the murmur of petitions, the quiet weight of judgments rendered. But today, a different kind of tension permeated the space. Deborah, her gaze steady, had spoken the divine command. The words, imbued with the unwavering certainty of God's voice, had settled upon the man before her like a mantle of profound responsibility. Barak, son of Abinoam, a man whose name was etched in the annals of Naphtali for his courage in skirmishes and his keen understanding of the land's terrain, stood before her, the weight of the prophecy pressing down on him. He was no stranger to conflict, nor to the cyclical oppression that had become the bitter bread of Israel. He had seen the scorched earth, heard the cries of the widowed and orphaned, felt the gnawing fear that paralyzed even the stoutest hearts when the dust clouds of Sisera's chariots appeared on the horizon. He understood the enemy's strength, the gleam of bronze, the thundering hooves, the sheer terror they instilled. He had led men before, albeit in smaller, more localized engagements, always with the underlying knowledge of Israel's diminished stature, their reliance on guile and terrain rather than overwhelming force. But this was different. This was a direct confrontation with Sisera's might, a mobilization of 10,000 men against an enemy that seemed invincible. The divine commission, as relayed by Deborah, was clear and unambiguous. Yahweh Himself had spoken, decreeing that it was time to rise, to shake off the yoke of Canaanite dominion. The battle was to be fought, the land reclaimed. Barak, as a man of military repute, was designated as the one to lead this charge. The number, 10,000, echoed in his mind, a significant force, yet dwarfed by the formidable legions Sisera commanded. It was a proposition that demanded not just courage, but an almost suicidal faith. He looked at Deborah, her face serene yet etched with the gravity of the revelation. He knew her, respected her deeply. Her pronouncements were not the ramblings of a fevered mind but the clear, unwavering pronouncements of the Most High. He had witnessed her wisdom, her justice, her uncanny ability to discern God's will in the tangled affairs of men. Yet, the sheer audacity of the command, the terrifying odds, began to sow a seed of unease within him. It was not a doubt of God's power, for who could doubt the one who had led their fathers out of Egypt? It was a doubt, perhaps, of his own capacity, a fear that he, a mere mortal, could possibly orchestrate such a divinely ordained victory against such overwhelming odds. 10,000 men, Barak repeated, his voice a low rumble, barely audible above the gentle rustling of the leaves. He ran a hand over the rough weave of his tunic, a nervous gesture that belied his outward calm. Against Sisera and his 900 iron chariots. It is a daunting task, prophetess. He met her gaze, and in his eyes, a plea began to surface, a vulnerability he rarely showed. God's command is clear, and I hear it through you. But the magnitude of it, the sheer power of the enemy, it weighs heavily. He paused, searching for the right words, the words that would articulate the gnawing uncertainty that had begun to bloom in his gut. My strength lies in leading men, in knowing the ground, in planning for defense. But this is a direct assault against a force that has crushed all who have dared to stand against it. Their chariots are like thunder, their soldiers like a plague. To face them head-on, with only 10,000 men. It seems a path paved with a bitter end, no matter the divine promise. Barak felt a familiar tremor of fear, one he had suppressed during his years of defending his people's borders. It was the fear of the unknown, the fear of failure that could have devastating repercussions for every Israelite in the land. He envisioned the grim faces of the men who would follow him, the families they would leave behind, all bound for a confrontation that seemed, from a human perspective, to court disaster. He was a warrior, yes, but he was also a leader responsible for the lives of his kinsmen. Prophetess, he began again, his voice gaining a touch of urgency, I will go. I will gather the men from Naphtali, from Zebulun, from all who will answer the call. But I cannot go alone. The words tumbled out, a confession of his deepest need. He swallowed, his throat suddenly dry. I need you with me. Your presence, your counsel, your connection to the divine. That is what will give these men, and indeed, myself, the courage to face such a foe. Without you, the assurance of God's victory feels distant. My faith falters when I stand on the precipice of such overwhelming power. I need to feel God's presence beside me, to hear His voice guiding us through the storm, not just as a distant decree, but as a tangible force through you. He looked at Deborah, his gaze earnest, almost pleading. If God is truly commanding this, then He will surely understand. He has always worked through His chosen messengers. You are His voice, Deborah. You are His comfort and His strength. I cannot lead this army into the jaws of such danger without the living embodiment of God's promise marching alongside us. It is not a question of my will against His, but of my human frailty needing divine reassurance. Tell me, prophetess, will you go with me? Will you stand by my side, so that we may know for certain that this is truly Yahweh's war? The request hung in the air, a testament to Barak's deep-seated respect for Deborah and his profound understanding of the spiritual warfare that lay at the heart of Israel's struggles. He knew that victory was not solely a matter of earthly strategy, but of divine favor. And Deborah, the prophetess, the judge, was the conduit through which that favor flowed. His hesitation was not a rejection of God's command, but a human acknowledgement of the immense fear that such a command inspired, and a reliance on the spiritual anchor that Deborah represented. He needed her not just to deliver the message, but to embody the presence of God, to be the living assurance that their improbable mission was not a fool's errand, but a divinely ordained path to liberation. He was willing to face the enemy, but he needed the unwavering certainty that only Deborah could provide. His request was a subtle, yet powerful, affirmation of their shared destiny, a testament to the potent synergy between earthly leadership and divine guidance, a recognition that their mission was a joint venture between heaven and earth. He was ready to lead, but he needed his spiritual compass to navigate the perilous journey ahead. The weight of Barak's plea settled in the air, a palpable thing that seemed to thicken the very atmosphere beneath Deborah's palm. She met his gaze, her own eyes, deep pools reflecting an ancient wisdom, now alight with a fierce, unwavering certainty. The tremor of his doubt, the raw vulnerability of his fear, was not a weakness in her eyes, but a testament to the immense burden he carried, a burden shared by all of Israel. Barak, son of Abinoam, Deborah's voice, though soft, carried the resonant echo of divine authority. It was a voice that had soothed the wronged, guided the lost, and now, it was poised to ignite a nation. You hear the command of Yahweh, and you do not shrink from it. That, in itself, is a sign of the courage that resides within you. You speak of the daunting task, of Sisera's iron chariots and his formidable host. These are earthly matters, the calculations of men who count swords and horses. But this is not a battle of chariots, Barak. This is a battle for the soul of Israel, a battle where the Lord of hosts himself will march before you. She stepped closer, her presence radiating a calm assurance that began to push back the shadows of Barak's apprehension. Do you think Yahweh, who parted the Red Sea to deliver your fathers from Pharaoh's might, would lead you to this precipice only to abandon you? Do you believe he who rained down manna from heaven in the barren wilderness would now leave his people to the mercy of a Canaanite oppressor? Her voice rose, imbued with a power that transcended mere human vocalization. Look not to the numbers of Sisera's army, nor to the gleam of his bronze. Look instead to the unfailing might of the one who commands the heavens and the earth. His promise is not a whisper, it is a trumpet blast that shatters the foundations of fear. Deborah extended her hand, not to touch, but to encompass him in the aura of her conviction. You ask if I will go with you, Barak. You ask for the tangible presence of God's assurance. And I say to you, as the Spirit of the Lord moves within me, I will go. I will stand with you, not as a mere companion, but as the voice of the Almighty. Your 10,000 men will not march alone. They will march with the Lord of Sabaoth, with the God of Israel fighting their battles. The cry of your warriors will be met by the thunder of his judgment, and the dust clouds of Sisera's chariots will be scattered by the winds of his wrath. She paused, allowing her words to sink deep into his soul, to counteract the insidious whispers of doubt. But hearken, Barak, to the full counsel of God. For victory, though assured, will not unfold as you might imagine. The glory of this triumph will not be yours alone, nor will it be won solely by the strength of your arm or the strategy of your commanders. The Lord has decreed it. He will deliver Sisera into the hand of a woman. The pronouncement hung in the air, a riddle wrapped in a prophecy, a seed of intrigue planted amidst the certainty of deliverance. Barak's brow furrowed, not in disbelief, but in deep contemplation. A woman. How could a woman be instrumental in the defeat of the mighty Sisera, a warrior whose reputation was built on brute force and military might? This was not the usual narrative of conquest, where the hero's valor was paramount. This spoke of a deeper, more intricate tapestry of divine intervention, where even the most unexpected instruments could be wielded for God's ultimate purpose. A woman, Barak echoed, the word tasting strange on his tongue. He looked at Deborah, sensing that this was not a mere detail, but a crucial element of the divine plan. How can this be, prophetess? Sisera is a man of war, his strength lies in his legions, his terror in his chariots. What part can a woman play in such a conflict? Deborah's eyes held a knowing glint. The Lord's ways are not our ways, Barak, nor are his thoughts our thoughts. He delights in confounding the wisdom of the wise and the strength of the mighty. He chooses the weak to shame the strong, the humble to exalt the proud. This is not a mere footnote to the victory, Barak. It is a testament to the Lord's sovereign hand, a declaration that he orchestrates all things, even the very circumstances that lead to the downfall of his enemies. She continued, her voice gaining a prophetic fervor. You will gather your 10,000 men. You will march to Mount Tabor. And there, the Lord will indeed deliver Sisera into your hands. But the final blow, the ultimate humiliation of the oppressor, will be struck by a hand that is not trained for battle, by a heart that beats not with the war cry, but with the quiet rhythm of domestic life. This prophecy is a sign, Barak. A sign that God's victory is absolute, that no earthly power can stand against him, and that he can use any vessel, however seemingly insignificant, to accomplish his mighty purposes. It is a promise that even in the darkest hour, hope can be found in the most unexpected places, and that the Lord's deliverance is often more profound and more surprising than we can ever conceive. The assurance of victory was now intertwined with a mystery, a divine enigma that only deepened the conviction that this was no ordinary military campaign. It was a spiritual undertaking, orchestrated by a God who reveled in his own omnipotence, revealing it through seemingly paradoxical means. So, you see, Barak, Deborah continued, her gaze steady and unwavering, while the battle will be fierce, and the enemy's strength formidable, the outcome is already written. Yahweh has declared it. He will grant you victory. But remember this, the credit belongs not to man, but to God. He will fight for you, and you will hold your peace. You will lead your men, yes, but it is the Lord who will grant them the strength, the courage, and the ultimate triumph. He will confuse Sisera's host, cause their chariots to falter, and their soldiers to turn against each other. The very earth will tremble at his command, and the heavens will open to pour down his blessing upon Israel. She looked out towards the horizon, as if seeing beyond the immediate landscape to the unfolding events. The promise is not merely of freedom, Barak, but of a return to righteousness. It is a reclaiming of our covenant with the Most High. This victory will be a testament to all the nations that Yahweh is the true God, the God of Israel. It will be a reminder that obedience to his word brings blessing, and defiance brings only destruction. And in this victory, a woman's role, though unexpected, will be a pivotal testament to God's intricate design, a silent but powerful affirmation that his strength is made perfect in weakness, and his glory revealed in the most humble of circumstances. The certainty in Deborah's voice was a balm to Barak's soul. The initial fear had begun to recede, replaced by a dawning awe. He understood now that this was not a venture of his own making, nor even one solely of Barak the warrior. It was Yahweh's war, and he was but an instrument in his mighty hand. The prophecy of the woman, while puzzling, did not diminish the promise of victory, but rather amplified it, revealing the depth and complexity of God's power. I understand, prophetess, Barak said, his voice now firm, imbued with a renewed resolve. I will gather the men. We will march to Mount Tabor, as you have been instructed. And we will trust in the Lord of hosts. We will not boast in our strength, for all strength comes from him. And we will await his unfolding plan, trusting that even the mystery of Sisera's downfall through a woman will ultimately bring glory to his name. He looked at Deborah, a profound sense of peace settling upon him. Thank you, Deborah. Your words have not only granted me the courage to lead, but the wisdom to understand that this is a battle fought on more than one front. It is a battle for our land, and a battle for our faith. And with you beside me, and the unwavering promise of God's victory, I believe we can face whatever comes. The air beneath the palm tree seemed to lighten, the oppressive weight of anxiety lifting. The promise of victory, once a distant echo, now resonated with a clear, clarion call. It was a victory that would not be claimed by human might alone, but by divine intervention, a testament to a God who could turn the tide of battle with a whisper, and humble the proudest of kings through the most unlikely of hands. Barak, no longer a man consumed by doubt, stood ready, a leader empowered by the divine assurance that his God would fight for him, and that a woman's role, however unforeseen, would be etched into the annals of this momentous deliverance. The path ahead was still fraught with peril, but the promise of victory, now illuminated by the intriguing prophecy, burned brightly, a beacon of hope for a land long oppressed. It was a promise that transcended mere military triumph. It was a promise of liberation, of vindication, and of a God who, in his infinite wisdom, could orchestrate salvation in ways that defied human comprehension, ensuring that all glory, all praise, and all honor would be his alone. Chapter 6. The Song of Triumph, Deborah's Leadership. The prophetess's pronouncement, a potent blend of divine decree and enigmatic prophecy, had resonated through the heart of Israel. Barak, though still wrestling with the paradox of a woman's pivotal role in the impending victory, had emerged from under the great palm tree of Deborah with a renewed, albeit cautious, sense of purpose. The whispers of doubt that had clung to him like the oppressive Canaanite yoke began to dissipate, replaced by the stirring call to arms. The word had gone forth, carried on the wind and through the impassioned voices of messengers dispatched by Deborah and Barak. Now, the arduous task of mobilizing the scattered tribes commenced, a monumental undertaking that would test not only the courage of Israel's warriors but the very unity of their fractured people. The initial ripple of the call to arms spread from the fertile plains of Ephraim, where Deborah resided, her presence a spiritual anchor for many. Messengers, swift and determined, fanned out across the land, their feet treading dusty paths and their voices echoing in the market squares and humble dwellings. They carried the weight of Barak's commission, bolstered by the undeniable authority of the prophetess. The message was clear: the Lord of hosts had commanded it, and Sisera's oppressive reign would be brought to an end. It was a call not just to battle, but to a liberation that had been long overdue, a plea for a return to the covenant broken by years of disobedience and the subsequent crushing weight of foreign domination. The response, however, was far from uniform. Like seeds scattered on varied soil, the tribes of Israel received the summons with differing degrees of fervor. The tribes of the northern hill country, particularly Asher, Zebulun, and Naphtali, whose territories bore the brunt of Sisera's cruelty and whose people suffered the most acutely under the iron heel of Canaanite chariotry, responded with an almost immediate surge of enthusiasm. For these tribes, the call was not merely a military imperative, it was a desperate cry for survival, a chance to reclaim their ancestral lands and their dignity. The memory of Sisera's brutal raids, the ransacked villages, and the stolen harvests was a raw wound that the prospect of retribution and freedom could begin to heal. In Naphtali, where the plains were often trampled by Sisera's dreaded chariots, the news ignited a wildfire of anticipation. The elders, their faces etched with the hardship of years of oppression, gathered in hushed, urgent council. The stories of Sisera's military might, once a source of paralyzing fear, were now reframed as a challenge, a divine gauntlet thrown down by Yahweh himself. "He has 1,200 chariots of iron," one elder muttered, his voice thick with a mixture of apprehension and burgeoning hope. "But our God has no chariots, and yet he controls the heavens and the earth. If Deborah, the mother in Israel, has spoken, then we must believe. We will not stand idly by while our brothers suffer." Young men, their muscles taut and their spirits eager, began to sharpen their bronze-tipped spears and repair their leather shields, their hearts already pounding with the rhythm of an approaching conflict. The call to arms in Naphtali was not a hesitant step, but a fervent leap of faith. Zebulun, a tribe known for its mercantile spirit and its access to trade routes, also heard the call with a determined resolve. While their primary focus was often on commerce, the pervasive fear and economic disruption caused by Canaanite control could not be ignored. The oppression was a tax on their livelihoods, a constant threat to their burgeoning prosperity. The notion of a united Israel, free from the stranglehold of a foreign power, held a powerful appeal. Their leaders, pragmatic and astute, recognized that a decisive victory against Sisera would not only restore their spiritual freedom but also secure the future of their trade and their families. They began to muster their strongest men, men accustomed to both negotiation and the defense of their caravans, and prepared to march towards the rendezvous point, their determination fueled by a blend of faith and foresight. Asher, situated along the coast, a region heavily influenced by the Canaanite presence and the maritime trade of the Phoenicians, displayed a similar, albeit slightly more measured, response. The proximity to the centers of Canaanite power meant that Asher had long endured a more subtle, yet equally debilitating, form of subjugation. Their people were accustomed to navigating the complexities of coexistence, but the recent intensification of Sisera's demands and the growing insecurity had made that a precarious balancing act. When the call to arms arrived, it found many in Asher wrestling with the ingrained caution born of their circumstances. Yet, the memory of Yahweh's past deliverances, and the unwavering conviction radiating from Deborah, spurred them to action. They too would send their contingent, their contribution perhaps less about swift, fervent zeal and more about a deep-seated, enduring loyalty to their God and their brethren. Further south, the response from the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh, those dwelling beyond the Jordan, was more complex. These tribes, separated by the formidable river and often more engaged with their own pastoral livelihoods and intertribal concerns, had a less immediate connection to the direct pressures exerted by Sisera in the northern heartland. While they were not immune to the spiritual and political repercussions of Canaanite dominance, their immediate physical experience of oppression was often less acute. Consequently, when the messengers arrived, their reception was marked by a degree of deliberation. They were loyal to the covenant, and they respected Deborah's spiritual authority, but the logistical challenges of crossing the Jordan and the perceived distance from the immediate threat meant that their mobilization was slower, marked by lengthy discussions and a careful assessment of their own defensive needs. Some among them, particularly those who had experienced Canaanite incursions or felt the economic pinch of disrupted trade routes, were quick to commit. Others, however, voiced concerns about their own security and the long journey ahead, requiring further persuasion and a clear understanding of the strategic imperatives. The heartland tribes, such as Benjamin and Judah, also began to stir. Benjamin, though smaller in number, possessed a fierce warrior spirit, and their loyalty to Yahweh was unquestioned. They readily answered the call, their warriors eager to prove their mettle. Judah, a more populous and influential tribe, provided a significant contingent, their commitment a crucial boost to the burgeoning army. However, even within these more responsive tribes, the inherent fragmentation of Israelite society presented challenges. Local leaders, captains of hundreds and thousands, had to contend with the ingrained autonomy of their communities, ensuring that men were not only willing but also equipped and ready to march. The process involved gathering provisions, organizing transport for those unable to travel on foot, and ensuring the security of the villages left behind. Yet, not all tribes responded with the same alacrity. The tribes of Dan and Simeon, who had historically faced significant internal struggles and had seen their territories diminished by outward pressures, exhibited a marked hesitancy. Dan, in particular, was known to have become increasingly insular, perhaps even succumbing to the allure of foreign customs and a focus on their own maritime ventures, which, while profitable, may have also diluted their commitment to the broader national cause. Their geographical isolation and their own internal conflicts may have made them feel less connected to the immediate crisis, or perhaps the years of hardship had bred a weariness that bordered on apathy. The messengers from Deborah and Barak found their reception in these regions to be cool, their impassioned pleas met with polite but non-committal responses. There was a sense of distance, a feeling that the troubles of the north did not directly impinge upon their own perceived security or prosperity. This, in itself, was a testament to the depth of Israel's disunity, a problem as insidious as Sisera's chariots. The tribe of Issachar, though renowned for its wisdom and understanding of the times, also presented a unique response. While they recognized the gravity of the situation and the divine mandate behind the call, their inclination was towards strategic counsel and the understanding of omens and signs. They would lend their wisdom and their keen observation of the temporal currents, but their direct military contribution, while honorable, was not as numerically significant as some of the more martial tribes. Their strength lay in their foresight and their ability to interpret the signs of the times, a different but vital form of support. The logistical challenges were immense. The Israelite army was not a standing force, but a mobilization of farmers, shepherds, artisans, and traders. The call to arms meant disrupting livelihoods, leaving fields untended, flocks unguarded, and workshops silent. Messengers had to coordinate rendezvous points, often in remote and strategically defensible locations. Supplies had to be gathered from disparate sources, grain from the fertile valleys, dried meats and cheeses from the pastoralists, water skins filled from ancient wells. The sheer effort of organizing such a diverse and widely dispersed population was a testament to the growing urgency and the shared yearning for deliverance. As the days turned into weeks, the disparate threads of mobilization began to weave together. From the hills of Ephraim and Manasseh, from the plains of Zebulun and Naphtali, from the mountains of Judah and Benjamin, the men began to converge. They came on foot, their sandals kicking up dust on the well-trodden paths. They came on donkeys, laden with whatever meager provisions they could carry. They came on horseback, the elite warriors of Judah and Benjamin, their armor glinting in the sun. The air began to thrum with a new energy, a palpable sense of anticipation. The scattered embers of Israelite spirit were being fanned into a flame, coalescing around the central command of Deborah and Barak. The chosen gathering place was Mount Tabor, a majestic peak that rose in solitary splendor from the Jezreel Valley. Its strategic prominence offered a commanding view of the surrounding landscape and provided a natural defensive advantage. As the various contingents arrived, the slopes of Tabor began to fill with the banners and the sounds of an assembling army. The low murmur of conversations, the clatter of bronze weapons, the bleating of sheep brought for sustenance, the anxious calls of mothers and wives bidding farewell, all these sounds mingled to create a symphony of impending conflict. Yet, beneath the surface of this growing assembly, the lingering disunity of Israel could not be entirely masked. The tribes that had been hesitant to commit, those who had offered only token support or remained entirely aloof, cast a subtle shadow. The elders and captains of the more committed tribes exchanged worried glances, acutely aware that their victory, though assured by divine promise, would be all the more profound if it were won by a truly united Israel. The hesitations of Dan and Simeon were a constant source of concern, a reminder of the spiritual and social fractures that Sisera's oppression had exploited and deepened. Despite these reservations, the sheer force of conviction, embodied by Deborah's unwavering faith and Barak's newfound resolve, was a powerful unifying agent. The prophecy that the Lord would deliver Sisera into the hand of a woman, while still a point of deep contemplation, also served as a peculiar source of unity. It transcended the usual divisions of tribal loyalties and military prowess, pointing towards a divine intervention that would elevate all of Israel, not just the strongest or the most numerous. It was a shared mystery, a common focus that drew them together in anticipation of God's miraculous work. The camp on Mount Tabor buzzed with a mixture of fear and fervent hope. The men, hardened by years of toil and oppression, looked towards the distant encampments of Sisera, their mighty chariots a chilling symbol of Canaanite power. They spoke in hushed tones of the iron chariots, of the vastness of Sisera's army, of the seemingly insurmountable odds. But then their gazes would turn towards the simple tent where Deborah, the prophetess, resided, or towards Barak, the commander chosen by God, and a flicker of reassurance would ignite within them. They were not alone. They were not fighting with their own strength, but with the strength of Yahweh. The preparations continued, a tangible manifestation of their collective faith, a testament to their willingness to answer the call, and a poignant symbol of a nation slowly, painstakingly, beginning to heal and to rally under the banner of divine promise, poised on the brink of a song of triumph. The slopes of Mount Tabor, once a serene gathering place, now thrummed with the energy of a nation on the precipice of war. Thousands of Israelite warriors, a diverse tapestry of farmers, shepherds, and craftsmen, had answered the call. Their bronze spears and crude shields seemed a meager defense against the looming might of Canaan. Yet, an unshakable faith, fanned by Deborah's prophetic pronouncements and Barak's hesitant leadership, propelled them forward. They were not merely an army, they were a covenant people, rising against an oppressor who had not only stolen their lands and their livelihoods but had sought to extinguish the very flame of their God. Deborah, the spiritual heart of this nascent force, understood that spiritual preparation was as crucial as military strategy. From her tent atop the mountain, her prayers ascended, a steady current of supplication and unwavering trust in Yahweh. She saw not just the men gathered before her, but the generations of suffering that had brought them to this moment. She saw the cries of the oppressed, the silenced voices of her people, and the desecration of the holy places. Her gaze, steady and piercing, swept over the assembled multitude, her presence a beacon of calm in the rising tide of apprehension. Barak, standing beside her, his countenance a study in the weight of responsibility, felt the palpable tension emanating from his men. He, too, had wrestled with doubt, with the sheer audacity of their undertaking, but Deborah's conviction had been a steady anchor. Now, as the moment of confrontation loomed, that conviction was becoming his own. The divine strategy, revealed through Deborah's communion with Yahweh, was not one of brute force, but of cunning and divine intervention. The chosen battleground was the broad, fertile plain of the river Kishon, a place that would soon become synonymous with Israel's deliverance. This was no accidental choice. The flat, open terrain, so advantageous to Sisera's chariots, would also become the very instrument of his undoing. Deborah, with Barak at her side, meticulously planned their deployment. They would not meet Sisera head-on in a suicidal charge. Instead, they would lure him, drawing his formidable host into a trap. Messengers, their faces grim with the gravity of their task, were dispatched to the disparate contingents. The order was clear: descend from Mount Tabor and move towards the plains, positioning themselves strategically along the banks of the Kishon, not in a defensive line, but in a manner that would invite pursuit. The tribes of Naphtali and Zebulun, having suffered the most direct and brutal impact of Sisera's chariotry, were placed at the vanguard, their bravery a testament to their desperate yearning for freedom. They were to advance, to engage the enemy just enough to provoke a response, then to feign a retreat, drawing Sisera's mighty iron chariots into the heart of the plain, towards the sluggish, winding waters of the Kishon. The journey from Tabor was a slow, agonizing march. The plain of Jezreel, usually a scene of pastoral tranquility, was now a landscape of mounting dread. As the Israelites descended, the full scale of Sisera's encampment became terrifyingly apparent. It was a spectacle of immense power, a testament to Canaanite military might. 10,000 soldiers, a vast sea of men clad in gleaming bronze, stretched as far as the eye could see. But it was the chariots that truly inspired terror. Hundreds upon hundreds of them, their iron-shod wheels menacing, their bronze-plated bodies reflecting the harsh sun, stood ready. These were not mere war wagons, they were instruments of terror, designed to shatter enemy lines, to sow panic, and to crush all opposition. The sheer number of them was overwhelming, a formidable wall of destruction that seemed impossible to breach. The air grew heavy with an oppressive silence, broken only by the nervous shuffling of feet, the clinking of armor, and the strained breaths of men who knew they were about to face a foe of unimaginable strength. The smell of dust, mingled with the metallic tang of sweat and the faint, unsettling odor of horses, hung in the air. Fear, a cold and insidious enemy, began to creep into the hearts of even the most resolute warriors. Whispers passed from man to man, hushed and fearful. How can we stand against such a force? Their chariots are like the thunder of the heavens. We are but sheep before wolves. Barak, his jaw set, rode among his men, his voice, though strained, attempting to project a confidence he did not entirely feel. He saw the fear in their eyes, the tremor in their hands, and his own heart was a battlefield of doubt and determination. He remembered Deborah's words, her unwavering certainty in Yahweh's promise. The Lord will deliver Sisera into the hand of a woman, she had declared. This prophecy, though a source of confusion and awe, was also their greatest hope. It was a sign that this victory would not be won by human might alone, but by divine intervention. As the Israelite vanguard, comprised primarily of men from Naphtali and Zebulun, advanced onto the plain, a ripple of movement swept through Sisera's vast encampment. The Canaanite commander, a shrewd and seasoned warrior, accustomed to crushing any rebellion with swift and brutal efficiency, regarded the approaching Israelites with disdain. He saw not an army, but a ragtag collection of farmers and shepherds, armed with little more than courage and desperation. He perceived their advance as an act of supreme foolishness, a suicidal gesture that would serve only to provide a bloody spectacle for his men. Sisera, mounted on his own magnificent chariot, its bronze gleaming and its horses powerful and well-trained, signaled the advance. The order rippled through his ranks, a low rumble that grew into a deafening roar. The ground began to tremble as the first wave of chariots surged forward, their drivers urging their horses onward with sharp cries. The plains of Kishon, soon to be transformed into a scene of carnage, became a stage for the unleashing of unparalleled military power. The Israelites, following Deborah's strategy, did not stand firm. They engaged, yes, but with a carefully orchestrated series of feints and withdrawals. Spears were hurled, arrows loosed, but the primary objective was to draw the enemy deeper, to entice them into the marshy terrain near the river, where the advantage of their chariots would be severely diminished. The initial clash was a whirlwind of dust, the clash of bronze, and the terrified cries of horses. The Canaanite chariots, designed for open warfare, found themselves navigating a terrain that was beginning to betray them. The river Kishon, normally a gentle stream, had been swollen by recent rains, its banks widening and its currents becoming treacherous. The soft earth of the plain, saturated with water, became a treacherous mire, threatening to bog down the heavy chariots. As Sisera, confident of an easy victory, ordered his entire force to pursue the seemingly retreating Israelites, his army advanced into a landscape that was slowly turning against them. The tension on the plain was a palpable, suffocating entity. It was the silence before the storm, the held breath of a nation on the verge of either utter annihilation or miraculous deliverance. Deborah, her face etched with the intensity of her communion with the divine, stood watching from a vantage point on the foothills, her heart pounding with a mixture of dread and unwavering faith. She could feel the tremor of the approaching conflict, the psychic weight of thousands of lives poised on the brink. Barak, his sword drawn, his eyes fixed on the churning dust clouds that marked the movement of Sisera's army, was a figure of grim resolve. His men, arrayed in their positions, their faces a mosaic of fear and determination, looked to him, and through him, to the unseen power that had set them on this path. Sisera, blinded by arrogance and the sheer weight of his military might, saw only the fleeing Israelites. He saw their apparent disarray as a sign of their utter defeat, their willingness to abandon the field as proof of their cowardice. He spurred his horses forward, eager to engage, to crush, to annihilate. He could already envision the triumphant return to his stronghold, the spoils of war, the utter subjugation of this upstart people. He failed to see the subtle shifts in the terrain, the strategic placement of the Israelite forces, the invisible hand of the Almighty at work. The plain of the Kishon, a place of fertile promise, was about to become a theater of divine judgment. The sheer power of Sisera's army, the terrifying presence of his iron chariots, stood poised against the courage and faith of a united Israel. The air crackled with the anticipation of battle, a silence heavy with the unwritten future, a future that hinged on the courage of Barak, the wisdom of Deborah, and the ultimate power of their God to turn the tide of seemingly insurmountable odds. The confrontation at the river Kishon was not just a battle for survival, it was a testament to the enduring power of faith in the face of overwhelming darkness, a prelude to a song of triumph that would echo through the ages. The stage was set, the players in position, and the divine hand was about to move, orchestrating a victory that would be both miraculous and utterly devastating to the oppressor. The ground itself seemed to hold its breath, awaiting the inevitable clash that would reshape the destiny of a nation. The heavens, which had held their breath with the tenseness of the impending clash, finally broke. Not with the thunderous roar of war, but with a sudden, furious torrent of rain. It descended upon the plain of Jezreel with a violence that seemed almost personal, as if the very skies had been roused to righteous anger. The air, thick with the metallic tang of fear and the oppressive heat of the approaching confrontation, was suddenly ripped apart by the lashing downpour. It was a deluge, a biblical flood that transformed the parched earth into a sodden, treacherous morass. Sisera, at the head of his formidable host, had anticipated a swift and brutal victory. His iron chariots, the pride of his army, were designed for open warfare, for plowing through enemy lines like a scythe through wheat. They were instruments of terror, their polished bronze gleaming ominously in the scant light that filtered through the storm clouds. But the plains of Kishon, intended to be the stage for his triumph, were rapidly becoming a watery grave. The ground, already softened by the recent rains, turned to a thick, clinging mud that sucked at the wheels of the chariots. The powerful steeds, straining against the mire, found their hooves sinking deep, their powerful legs struggling to gain purchase. The momentum that had been so carefully built, the terrifying charge that was meant to shatter the Israelite ranks, faltered and died in the clinging earth. A ripple of confusion, then alarm, spread through the Canaanite ranks. The drivers, accustomed to commanding their magnificent machines with precision and speed, found themselves wrestling with an adversary they had not foreseen, the very earth beneath them. The iron of their chariots, their supposed advantage, now became a crushing weight, dragging them down into the mud. Horses whinnied in distress, their sleek bodies coated in thick, cloying mud, their powerful muscles rendered useless by the unforgiving terrain. The organized ranks began to break, the unified force disintegrating into a chaotic struggle for survival. Men slipped and fell, their heavy armor pulling them down, their cries of frustration lost in the roar of the rain. The Israelites, positioned strategically on the higher ground and along the riverbanks, watched with a mixture of awe and fervent prayer. They saw the mighty chariots, the symbol of Canaanite oppression, bogged down, their menace neutralized. The rain, which had initially been a source of apprehension, now felt like a divine benediction. It was not a natural occurrence, not merely a shift in the weather. This was the hand of Yahweh, extended in defense of his people. Deborah, her gaze fixed on the unfolding scene from her vantage point, felt a surge of exultation. This was the promised deliverance, a testament to the power of faith against overwhelming odds. Barak, his heart pounding with a fierce gratitude, saw the fear in the eyes of his warriors replaced by a dawning hope. The impossible was happening. The rain continued to fall, unabated, its relentless assault turning the battlefield into a churning expanse of mud and water. The river Kishon, once a gentle stream, was now a raging torrent, its waters overflowing its banks and spreading across the plain. This unexpected flooding further exacerbated the chaos for Sisera's army. The shallow fords that might have offered some passage were now submerged, the currents too strong to navigate. The soldiers, trying to extricate themselves from the mud, found themselves being swept away by the swollen river. The Canaanite military machine, so carefully constructed, so seemingly invincible, was being systematically dismantled by the very elements. Sisera, his magnificent chariot now half sunk in the mud, his usually immaculate armor splattered with the dark earth, was a picture of disarray. His face, once a mask of confident command, was contorted with disbelief and mounting panic. He bellowed orders, but his voice was lost in the cacophony of the storm and the cries of his men. The disciplined army that had marched onto the plain with such terrifying precision was now a scattered, struggling mass. The iron chariots, designed to crush and destroy, were now trapped, their crews vulnerable and exposed. Many of the horses had thrown their riders, escaping into the muddy expanse, adding to the general mayhem. The Israelite warriors, their hearts filled with a courage that transcended their fear, began to advance. They moved with a renewed vigor, their steps lighter now that the formidable threat of the chariots had been so dramatically curtailed. They were no longer facing an invincible force, but a demoralized and disorganized enemy. The rain had washed away not only the dry ground but also the aura of invincibility that had surrounded Sisera's army. The Israelites, armed with their spears and their faith, descended upon the beleaguered Canaanites, striking them down with a ferocity born of years of oppression and the sudden, miraculous turn of events. The mud became an accomplice to their efforts. It hindered the Canaanite soldiers' attempts to flee, their heavy armor becoming an unbearable burden. They stumbled, they fell, and they were easily overtaken. The Israelites, accustomed to the rough terrain of their homeland, navigated the quagmire with greater ease. They saw the divine hand at work, and it emboldened them. Each fallen enemy, each abandoned chariot, was a testament to Yahweh's power. The cries of the defeated echoed across the plain, a stark contrast to the proud boasts that had preceded the battle. Sisera, seeing the utter collapse of his forces, knew that his personal safety was now paramount. His strategy, his might, his chariots, all had been rendered futile. In a desperate bid for survival, he abandoned his chariot and fled on foot, a shadow swallowed by the storm and the deepening mud. He sought refuge, a desperate, ignominious flight from the very people he had so arrogantly sought to crush. His journey was no longer one of conquest, but of desperate escape, a testament to the fact that even the most formidable earthly power could be rendered powerless by the will of the Almighty. The rain, a torrential force for destruction for Sisera's army, became a veil of protection for the Israelites. It obscured their movements, muffled their sounds, and churned the ground beneath the feet of their pursuers, making escape all the more difficult. The storm was not merely an event, it was an active participant in the unfolding drama, a tool wielded by the divine to orchestrate a victory that was as spectacular as it was divinely ordained. The battle was no longer a contest of human strength and military might, it had become a profound demonstration of God's power to intervene, to protect, and to utterly confound the prideful designs of men who dared to defy him and his people. The song of triumph was not yet sung, but its melody was already being carried on the wings of the wind and the drumming of the rain upon the sodden earth. The deluge that had so thoroughly undone Sisera's grand army continued its relentless assault, transforming the once proud plain of Jezreel into a treacherous mire. For Sisera, the commander of 1,000 chariots, the architect of so much suffering for Israel, the sight of his war machine swallowed by mud was a bitter, suffocating draught of defeat. The roar of the storm, once a backdrop to his imagined triumph, now mocked him with its fury, each gust of wind a whisper of his downfall. His chariots, gleaming instruments of his dominion, were now monuments to his hubris, half submerged in the grasping earth, their bronze hulls slick with mud and despair. He had stood in his chariot, the storm lashing at him, the cries of his men a rising tide of panic. The meticulous order of his advance had dissolved into chaos. Horses, panicked and struggling, threw their riders. Soldiers, weighed down by their armor, found themselves sinking, their desperate struggles only deepening their entanglement. The meticulously planned battlefield, intended to showcase Canaanite might, had become a watery tomb. The very ground, the foundation of his strategy, had turned against him. In that moment, as the last vestiges of organized resistance crumbled around him, a primal instinct seized Sisera: survival. The warrior king, accustomed to the deference of thousands and the unquestioned obedience of his troops, found himself utterly alone amidst the pandemonium. His carefully cultivated image of invincibility shattered like brittle glass. He was no longer the triumphant general, but a man facing the terrifying prospect of oblivion. Orders, once so easily issued and obeyed, died on his lips, lost in the wind and rain. The roar of the Kishon, swollen and furious, mirrored the tempest in his own soul. With a heave that sent a cascade of mud splattering against his helmet, Sisera dismounted. The polished leather of his boots sank into the muck, a stark contrast to the dry, ordered ground he had expected. He scrambled from the ruined chariot, leaving behind the symbol of his power, a sacrifice to the insatiable mud. His once immaculate commander's cloak was now a sodden, heavy burden, clinging to him like a shroud. He ran, not with the swift, purposeful stride of a victorious warrior, but with the desperate, stumbling gait of a hunted animal. He ran away from the sounds of his dying army, away from the triumphant shouts of the Israelites that began to pierce the storm's din. Each splash of his feet in the deepening puddles felt like a nail in the coffin of his pride. The rain plastered his hair to his forehead, and trickles of cold water ran down his face, indistinguishable from the sweat of his exertion or the tears of his humiliation. He had marched into battle with the sun on his face and the wind at his back, full of arrogant certainty. Now, he plunged into the storm, the sky itself seemingly weeping for his downfall. The battlefield, a scene of such swift and brutal devastation, was a confusing labyrinth of mud, fallen bodies, and abandoned war machines. Sisera navigated it by instinct, his senses honed by years of warfare, yet dulled by the overwhelming shock of defeat. He avoided the open stretches, where the sounds of the pursuing Israelites might reach him. He sought the meager cover offered by scattered clumps of thorn bushes, their branches still dripping with the rain's bounty. His breath came in ragged gasps, his lungs burning with the effort and the cold, damp air. His mind, usually so sharp and calculating, reeled from the onslaught of disaster. He had underestimated Israel. He had underestimated their God. He had underestimated the ferocity that desperation could breed. He had seen himself as an agent of divine justice, a scourge sent to chastise a rebellious people. Now, he was a fugitive, his divine mission reduced to a desperate scramble for his own life. The very people he had come to subjugate were now his pursuers, their victory a testament to a power far greater than his own. He glanced back, a fleeting, panicked look. The plain was a swirling, muddy chaos. He could no longer distinguish friend from foe in the gloom and the downpour. The organized ranks he had led were no more. They were scattered, broken, and drowning in the very earth they had sought to conquer. The sight spurred him onward, a fresh wave of fear propelling him through the clinging mud. He had to get away, to put as much distance as possible between himself and the scene of his ignominious collapse. His path led him away from the heart of the battlefield, towards the less treacherous, though still waterlogged, terrain that bordered the plain. He knew this region. It was the territory of the Kenites, a nomadic tribe who, by some peculiar arrangement, maintained a fragile peace with the Canaanites. Their allegiance, he knew, was not to strength of arms, but to the shifting winds of fortune. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble, but he had few other options. His army was gone, his chariots were sunk, his reputation was in tatters. He pushed through a thicket of reeds, their wet leaves slapping against his face. The mud here was less deep, but the water was still thigh-high in places, chilling him to the bone. His heavy armor, once a symbol of his status and protection, now felt like a leaden weight, dragging him down, hindering his progress. He longed to shed it, to run with the lightness of a gazelle, but it was fused to him by mud and desperation. Each step was an effort, a testament to his dwindling strength. He could hear them now, the distinct sound of pursuit. Not the thunder of chariots, but the quick, determined footsteps of men on foot, their shouts carrying on the wind, though distorted by the rain. They were coming. His own soldiers, those who had managed to escape the initial onslaught, would be even more desperate to escape, likely trampling anyone in their path. But these were the voices of his enemies, the Israelites. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through his exhaustion. He changed direction, veering away from the sound, plunging deeper into the reeds, hoping to lose himself in the dense vegetation. The water swirled around his waist, the reeds his only cover. He held his breath, listening intently, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. The sounds of pursuit seemed to fade, or perhaps they were merely masked by the persistent roar of the rain and the swelling river. He stumbled on, guided by a desperate need to find shelter, to find a place where he could simply stop running. His body ached, his muscles screamed in protest, but the fear of capture was a powerful, relentless goad. He had heard tales of the brutality of the Israelites when they had victory in their hands. He envisioned a swift, merciless end, a barbaric retribution for years of oppression. He was a king, a commander, a man of status. To be captured and humiliated by these peasants. It was unthinkable. He emerged from the reeds onto slightly higher ground, the earth still sodden but firm enough to offer purchase. He could see, through the driving rain, the outline of a dwelling. A tent, not a grand structure, but a portable dwelling, the kind favored by nomadic peoples. It was low-slung, made of dark fabric, blending into the muted landscape. And it was his only hope. He moved towards it with a renewed sense of urgency, his eyes fixed on the dark shape. As he drew closer, he could discern a faint glow emanating from within, the flickering light of a lamp. A sign of occupancy, a sign of potential refuge. He slowed his pace, his mind racing. He could not afford to alarm the inhabitants. He needed to approach with caution, to present himself not as a threat, but as a desperate supplicant. He reached the tent flap, his hand trembling as he reached out to push it aside. The rain was beginning to abate slightly, the downpour lessening to a steady, heavy shower. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and wet wool. He hesitated for a moment, a surge of apprehension washing over him. What if they turned him away? What if they were spies? What if they betrayed him to the Israelites? He took a deep breath, forcing himself to push past the doubt. He had come too far, endured too much, to turn back now. He lifted the tent flap and stepped inside. The interior was dimly lit by a single oil lamp, casting long, dancing shadows on the canvas walls. The air was warm, a welcome contrast to the chilling rain outside, and carried the scent of wood smoke and something else. Something earthy and domestic. A woman, her hair dark and unbound, looked up from where she sat tending a small fire. Her eyes, large and dark, widened slightly as she saw him, but there was no immediate sign of fear or alarm. She was dressed in simple, practical clothing, her hands calloused from labor. She was, he surmised, the mistress of this humble dwelling. Sisera stood there for a moment, a towering figure in his mud-splattered, royal attire, dripping water onto the packed earth floor. He was a stark contrast to the quiet domesticity of the tent. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound emerged. His throat was dry, his voice hoarse from the shouting and the exertion. He felt a profound sense of disorientation, the powerful commander reduced to a bewildered refugee. The woman rose slowly, her movements graceful and unhurried. She looked at him, her expression unreadable. She did not scream. She did not flee. She simply stood, observing him. Sisera managed to find his voice, a rough, strained whisper. "Shelter," he croaked, gesturing vaguely to the storm outside. "I seek shelter." He watched her carefully, searching for any flicker of recognition, any sign that she knew who he was, what he represented. He was the bane of Israel, the oppressor they had longed to be rid of. If she knew, if she recognized the symbols of his authority, his uniform, his very presence, her response could be swift and deadly. But her gaze remained steady, calm. She gestured with a hand towards a pile of woven mats near the fire. "Enter," she said, her voice surprisingly soft, yet clear. "Rest yourself. You are soaked." Sisera hesitated for a fraction of a second longer, his mind grappling with the unexpected gentleness of her reception. This was not the reaction he had anticipated. He had braced himself for suspicion, for fear, perhaps even for outright hostility. But this woman, Yael, the wife of Eber the Kenite, offered him a quiet, unassuming welcome. He moved further into the tent, his heavy boots making soft thuds on the earth. He sank onto the mats, the warmth of the fire a blessed relief against his chilled skin. He could feel his strength ebbing, the adrenaline that had fueled his flight finally beginning to recede, leaving behind a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. He closed his eyes for a moment, savoring the unexpected respite. The woman busied herself at the fire, her movements economical and precise. She poured a steaming liquid into a clay cup and brought it to him. Sisera took it, his fingers brushing hers. Her skin was rough, her touch firm. He raised the cup to his lips and drank. It was a mild, slightly bitter herbal infusion, but it warmed him from the inside out, soothing his parched throat. "You are far from any battle," she observed, her voice betraying no curiosity, no judgment. "The plain is a dangerous place to be caught in the storm." Sisera grunted in response, still wary. He did not want to reveal too much, not yet. He was a wolf seeking refuge in a shepherd's fold. He needed to be certain of his safety before he divulged any information that could betray him. He watched her from beneath lowered lids. She was a striking woman, with a quiet dignity about her. Eber the Kenite, he knew, was a man who moved with the times, who valued peace and a steady trade over the grand pronouncements of kings and commanders. Perhaps his wife was of a similar disposition. He sipped the warm drink, his eyes scanning the interior of the tent. It was sparsely furnished, but clean and orderly. Simple woven rugs lay on the floor, a few earthenware pots sat near the fire, and a collection of tools and weapons, presumably for hunting and defense, hung neatly on the walls. It was the dwelling of a people who lived by their own rules, outside the grander conflicts of the nations. "My men," Sisera began, then stopped. He could not say, "My army." It was too painful, too stark a reminder of his utter defeat. He settled for, "I was separated from my companions." Yael nodded, as if this were a perfectly reasonable explanation. She returned to her task, tending to the fire, her presence a quiet comfort in the dim light. Sisera watched her, a strange sense of calm beginning to settle over him. He had expected fear, hostility, perhaps even a treacherous hand. Instead, he found a simple, unasked-for act of hospitality. He leaned back against the soft mats, the warmth of the fire seeping into his weary limbs. The storm outside, which had been his relentless pursuer, now seemed like a distant, fading threat. He was here, in this tent, safe, for the moment. He closed his eyes again, the sounds of the rain and the crackling fire lulling him towards a much-needed slumber. His desperate flight had brought him to an unexpected sanctuary, a place where the great commander of chariots could, for a brief and fragile moment, simply be a man seeking respite from the storm. The true peril, however, had not yet revealed itself, lurking in the quiet strength of the woman who offered him this temporary haven. The last echoes of the storm faded, replaced by the quiet hum of relief that permeated the liberated lands. The Kishon, though still swollen with the tempest's fury, no longer roared with the threat of an invading horde. Instead, its waters carried away the remnants of Canaanite ambition, a testament to a divine intervention that had shattered the enemy's might. In the aftermath of such a monumental deliverance, a profound stillness settled upon Israel, a stillness pregnant with awe and gratitude. It was a moment ripe for remembrance, for declaration, for the outpouring of a grateful heart. And who better to give voice to this collective exultation than the woman who had stood as the very embodiment of their hope, the prophetess and judge, Deborah. Deborah, her spirit still soaring on the wings of victory, felt the stirring of a sacred muse. The events of the past days were not merely a military triumph, they were a divine narrative, a living testament to the power and faithfulness of the God of Israel. It was a story that needed to be told, sung, and etched into the very soul of her people. With Barak, the valiant general who had answered her call, at her side, she felt compelled to weave words that would capture the essence of their liberation, a song that would resonate through the ages. "Barak," she began, her voice clear and resonant, carrying a depth of emotion that mirrored the tumultuous journey they had undertaken, "let us lift our voices. Let us not merely recount the events, but celebrate the God who orchestrated them. Let our song be a bridge between this glorious victory and the generations yet unborn, so that they too may know the mighty acts of the Lord. Barak, his heart still thrumming with the exhilaration of battle and the humbling realization of their salvation, readily agreed. He had seen the divine hand at work. The storm is an instrument of God's wrath, the very earth conspiring against their foes. To praise the one who had granted them this victory was not just a duty, it was a joyous imperative. And so, amidst the clearing skies and the newly cleansed air of Jezreel, a song began to take shape. It was not a song of mere human prowess, though the bravery of Israel's warriors was undeniable. It was a song that began at the very throne of heaven, acknowledging the sovereignty of the Most High. Oh, that my head were waters, and mine eyes a fountain of tears, that I might weep day and night for the slain of the daughter of my people. The opening lines of Deborah's song, as recorded in Scripture, immediately set a tone of profound lament for the suffering Israel had endured, but it was a lament that would quickly transform into a fierce, triumphant ode. It spoke of the 20 years of oppressive servitude under Jabin, king of Canaan, a period that had weighed heavily upon the shoulders of the Israelites, stifling their spirit and draining their resources. The song painted a vivid picture of their vulnerability, of their brokenness, and of their desperate cries that had ascended to the heavens. Deborah's poetic genius lay in her ability to weave together the threads of human experience and divine intervention. She declared, "The villages in Israel were forsaken, until that I, Deborah, arose, a mother in Israel." This simple, yet powerful statement positioned her not just as a judge, but as a maternal figure, a protector who had risen in a time of dire need. Her emergence was not a matter of chance, but a divine appointment, a response to the people's supplication. She spoke of how the people flocked to her, seeking her wisdom and guidance, a testament to her authority and the trust they placed in her. The song then turned its focus to the mobilization for war, a crucial element of their deliverance. "Now therefore, send ye for the rulers of the tribes," Deborah urged, her words echoing the call to arms that had once sounded across the land. She spoke of the rallying of those who willingly offered themselves, those who, despite their fears and the overwhelming might of the enemy, stepped forward. "Bless ye the Lord," she cried, for even in the act of preparing for battle, the ultimate reliance was on God. The narrative shifted to the formidable power of the Canaanite oppressor, Sisera. The song described him as commanding 900 chariots of iron, a terrifying force that had instilled widespread fear. The imagery of these chariots, gleaming and formidable, underscored the immense challenge faced by the Israelites. But Deborah did not dwell on the enemy's strength for long. Her focus was on how God would use even the most humble instruments to achieve his purposes. "So let all thine enemies perish, O Lord, but let them that love him be as the sun when he goeth forth in his might." This was a pivotal moment in the song, a clear declaration of faith and a prophetic pronouncement. It drew a stark contrast between the fate of God's enemies and the fate of those who loved him. The imagery of the sun, rising in its full glory, symbolized the radiant power and inevitable triumph of Israel, guided and empowered by their divine protector. The song then vividly depicted the actual battle, transforming the chaotic events into a breathtaking epic. "And Barak went down from Mount Tabor, and 10,000 men with him." The descent from the mountain was not just a military maneuver, it was a symbolic act, a descent from a place of vantage and perhaps prayer, into the thick of the conflict. The mention of 10,000 men highlights the significant, though still seemingly outnumbered, force that stood against Sisera's might. The divine intervention during the battle was described with awe-inspiring imagery. The river of Kishon swept them away, that ancient river, the river of Kishon. The storm, which had been a harbinger of doom for Sisera's army, became the instrument of their watery destruction. The Kishon, a seemingly ordinary river, was transformed into a powerful agent of God's justice, swallowing the enemy whole. This was not just a natural phenomenon, it was a supernatural act, a celestial bombardment. "Let them be as the chaff before the wind, and as the tumbling weed before the whirlwind," the song declared, emphasizing the utter disintegration and powerlessness of the Canaanite forces when faced with God's might. Deborah's song then touched upon the treachery and the unexpected downfall of Sisera himself. From the heavens fought the stars, from their courses they fought against Sisera. This poetic language spoke of the cosmic forces aligned against the enemy, suggesting that even the celestial bodies were enlisted in God's war against oppression. It was a profound assertion that the battle was not just fought on earth, but on a grander, universal stage. The song narrated Sisera's desperate flight and his encounter with Yael. He called for water, and she gave him milk. She brought forth butter in a lordly dish. The description of Yael's actions was subtly nuanced, hinting at a deception woven into an act of hospitality. While Sisera sought water, a basic necessity, Yael offered him something richer, perhaps meant to lull him into a false sense of security. The lordly dish added a touch of irony, as Sisera, the lordly commander, was brought down by such seemingly humble means. Then said she, "Stand without the door of the tent, and when any is coming in to tell it, say, is there any here that saw it?" And he said, "There is none." This exchange, as recounted in the song, further emphasized Sisera's isolation and his misguided trust. He was so consumed by his belief in his own security, and perhaps the perceived neutrality of the Kenites, that he failed to see the ultimate danger lurking within the tent. The climax of Sisera's downfall was described with chilling finality. At her feet he bowed, he fell, he lay down, at her feet he bowed, he fell, where he bowed, there he fell down dead. The repetition of these phrases underscored the completeness of his defeat, the utter crushing of his pride and power. The mighty commander, who had terrorized Israel for 20 years, met his end in a manner ignominious and unexpected, struck down by a woman's hand while he slept. The song concluded with a powerful affirmation of Israel's newfound peace and the enduring strength of God's people. So let all thine enemies perish, O Lord, but let them that love him be as the sun when he goeth forth in his might. This refrain, repeated from earlier in the song, served as a powerful closing statement, a prayer and a declaration of unwavering faith in God's ultimate victory and protection. The 20 years of oppression were over, and a new era of peace, bought with blood and sustained by divine favor, had dawned. The Song of Deborah was more than just a historical account, it was a theological statement, a masterpiece of ancient Hebrew poetry. It was a vivid testament to the fact that Israel's victories were not born of their own strength, but of the active, dynamic power of their God. The song elevated the ordinary events of battle into a divine drama, where God was the ultimate protagonist, orchestrating the rise and fall of nations. The artistic merit of the song was undeniable. Deborah, a woman of profound spiritual insight and literary talent, crafted verses that were both powerful and evocative. The imagery was striking. The storm is a divine weapon, the river is a consuming force, the stars fighting from their courses, the sun rising in its might. These were not mere metaphors, they were profound expressions of a worldview where the divine and the earthly were intricately interwoven. Furthermore, the song served a crucial pedagogical purpose. By immortalizing the events in song, Deborah ensured that the memory of their deliverance would be passed down through generations. It was a way of teaching future Israelites about the nature of their God, his unwavering commitment to his people, and the consequences of opposing his will. It was a reminder that obedience and faith would lead to prosperity and peace, while arrogance and oppression would inevitably lead to ruin. The song also celebrated the courage of those who had stood with Deborah and Barak. It acknowledged the sacrifices made, the fears overcome, and the ultimate triumph of the human spirit when aligned with divine purpose. The mention of the different tribes, those who came willingly to battle, underscored the collective nature of their deliverance. It was not the victory of one individual, but of a people united under God. The inclusion of Yael's role, though controversial in its depiction of deception, was also significant. It highlighted how God could use unexpected individuals, even those on the fringes of Israelite society, to achieve his purposes. Yael, a Kenite woman, became an unwitting instrument of divine justice, proving that God's power transcended tribal and national boundaries. Her act, though morally complex, was presented within the song as part of God's grand design to crush the oppressor. In essence, the Song of Deborah was a vibrant declaration of independence, not just from Canaanite rule, but from the limitations of human power. It was a song that declared to the world that Israel's God was a God of action, a God who intervened in the affairs of humanity, a God who championed the cause of the oppressed. It was a song that resonated with the very heart of Israelite identity, forging a collective memory of faith, courage, and divine favor. The echoes of that song, sung in the aftermath of a storm-ravaged victory, would continue to inspire and guide the people of Israel, a timeless testament to the power of a song that rose from the depths of despair to the heights of divine triumph. Chapter 7. The Redeeming Kinsmen, Ruth and Boaz. The dust of the harvest had settled, not just on the fields, but on the heart of Naomi. The bounty of Boaz's generosity, the golden sheaves that had promised sustenance, had also sown a different kind of seed within her, a seed of hope for a future she had long believed lost. She had watched Ruth, her Moabite daughter, move with a quiet grace and an unwavering devotion amongst the gleaners, her presence a constant balm to Naomi's bruised spirit. But gratitude, while sweet, was not enough. Naomi yearned for something more permanent, a secure foundation for the woman who had become her anchor in the tempest of grief. The embers of her life, once thought extinguished, now flickered with a rekindled purpose, fanned by the quiet dignity of Ruth and the unexpected kindness of a man named Boaz. Naomi knew the ways of her people, the intricate tapestry of laws and customs woven to protect the vulnerable, to preserve lineage, and to ensure that no family name vanished from the annals of Israel. The concept of the goal, the kinsman redeemer, was deeply ingrained in the very fabric of their society. It was a sacred duty, a familial obligation to marry a widow of a deceased brother or relative, to raise up seed for his name, and to protect the ancestral inheritance. It was a law born of compassion and foresight, a bulwark against the bleakness of widowhood and childlessness. And as Naomi's gaze fell upon Ruth, her heart recognized the quiet unfolding of a divine plan, a path illuminated by the very traditions she had once felt so utterly alienated from. "My daughter," Naomi began, her voice soft but laced with a newfound urgency, her eyes fixed on Ruth as they sat together in the quiet intimacy of their humble dwelling. The day's labor had ended, the last rays of the sun painting the simple room in hues of ochre and rose, mirroring the burgeoning warmth in Naomi's soul. "You have shown me a loyalty that surpasses blood. You have honored the memory of my sons, and in doing so, you have honored me. Now, it is time that we secure your own future, a future that will not be adrift in the tides of uncertainty." Ruth looked up, her gentle eyes filled with a trust that had been hard-won. She had learned to lean on Naomi, to draw strength from her wisdom, even as Naomi herself grappled with the ruins of her past. "My mother," she replied, her voice a murmur of devotion, "whatever you deem is right, I shall do. My life is yours, as you have made it your own." A flicker of pain, a ghost of the bitterness she had carried for so long, crossed Naomi's face, but it was quickly replaced by a resolute calm. "No, my daughter," she corrected gently, "your life is your own, and it is a life worthy of joy and security. The Lord has been gracious to us. He has shown us favor through Boaz, a man of noble character and deep respect for the ancient ways." Naomi paused, choosing her words with the careful deliberation of a weaver selecting threads for a precious garment. She was about to propose a course of action that would seem, to the uninitiated, bold, perhaps even audacious. But Naomi understood the nuances of the law, the spirit behind the letter. She knew that in the aftermath of the harvest, when the work was done and the workers were gathered, a unique atmosphere prevailed, one of shared labor, of communal gratitude, and of a certain relaxed openness. "The harvest is now complete," Naomi continued, her gaze sharpening with intent. "And Boaz, in his kindness, has shown you favor. He has provided for you, and you have honored him with your diligence and respect. Now, there is a path, a time-honored custom, that could ensure your well-being, that could bind you to this land and to a future of security." Ruth listened intently, her brow furrowed slightly, sensing the weight of Naomi's words. She had been a stranger in this land, a widow twice over, her own people and customs left far behind. The laws and traditions of Israel were still a complex landscape for her, though she had striven to understand and uphold them. "There is an ancient law," Naomi explained, her voice taking on the cadence of a storyteller imparting sacred knowledge, "the law of the kinsman redeemer. When a man dies, leaving a widow without children, it is the duty of his nearest male relative, His goal, to marry her and to raise up a name for the deceased. This ensures that the inheritance remains within the family and that the widow is not left to face destitution alone. It is a way for the Lord to preserve families, to protect the vulnerable, and to ensure that no one is forgotten. Naomi's eyes, now shining with a hopeful light, met Ruth's. Boaz is a kinsman, though not the closest in line to your late husband, Mahlon. Yet, he has shown himself to be a man who honors these traditions. He has a good heart, Ruth, a heart that recognizes worth and acts with integrity. A subtle understanding began to dawn in Ruth's eyes, a dawning tinged with a touch of apprehension. She had seen Boaz's kindness, felt the warmth of his protection. But the idea of actively seeking this protection, of presenting herself in a way that might be misconstrued, was a daunting prospect. The threshing floor, Naomi continued, her voice dropping to a more confidential tone, after the harvest is gathered, is a place where the men often rest and celebrate the fruits of their labor. It is a time when spirits are somewhat relaxed, and matters of family and future are sometimes discussed with a greater openness. It is where Boaz will be overseeing the final winnowing and threshing of the grain. Naomi's plan was intricately woven, drawing upon the specific cultural context of the time. The threshing floor was not merely a place of work, it was often a social hub, especially in the evenings. It was a place where the landowner might relax with his workers, sharing in the bounty they had helped to create. It was under the cloak of night, amidst the scent of grain and the quiet hum of activity, that a woman might approach a man of respect with a delicate proposal, shielded by the anonymity of the dark and the general atmosphere of shared labor. Tonight, Naomi instructed, her gaze firm, after the day's work is done, and Boaz has retired to the threshing floor to rest, you are to go there. You will wait until he is asleep. Then, you will approach his feet and uncover them, and lie down. It is a symbolic act, Ruth, a humble presentation of yourself and your need. It speaks of submission, of seeking protection and provision from one who has the right and the duty to offer it. Ruth's breath hitched. The instruction was clear, yet the implications were profound. It required a deep well of courage and an even deeper well of faith. To approach a man of Boaz's stature in such a manner, in the quiet darkness of the threshing floor, was an act that demanded both vulnerability and unwavering trust in the unfolding of God's will. It was a step outside the ordinary, a deliberate engagement with a tradition that held the power to redefine her future. And when he wakes, Naomi continued, her voice steady, and discovers you at his feet, you are not to be afraid. You are to speak to him. You will remind him of the law, of your widowed state, and of your desire for a kinsman redeemer. You will say, I am Ruth, your servant. Spread the corner of your garment over me, for you are a redeemer of the inheritance. Quote. Naomi's words painted a vivid picture in Ruth's mind. The image of herself, lying at the feet of Boaz, the scent of the earth and the grain heavy in the air, and then the courage to speak, to voice the deepest yearning of her heart and her most profound need. It was a prayer made manifest, a tangible step toward securing a future. This act, Naomi emphasized, her hand reaching out to gently cup Ruth's cheek, her thumb caressing the smooth skin, is not one of boldness for the sake of boldness. It is a presentation of your need within the framework of our laws. It is a way to ensure that Boaz, as a man of honor, will consider his obligation. He will know that you are not seeking him for mere companionship, but for the fulfillment of the law, for the continuation of your husband's line, for the security that only a redeemer can provide. Naomi understood the delicate balance required. It was not a clandestine meeting, but a carefully orchestrated approach within the accepted norms of the time. The threshing floor, in the context of harvest, was a place where such matters, though serious, could be broached with a degree of openness, especially between individuals of recognized standing and character. Boaz, as a man of God, would understand the significance of Ruth's approach, especially when couched in the language of the kinsman redeemer law. He is a good man, Ruth, Naomi reiterated, her voice filled with conviction. He has already shown you great kindness. I believe he will act justly. But you must be prepared. You must approach him with humility, with reverence for the law, and with unwavering faith in the God who has guided us this far. Your trust is not in me, my daughter, but in the Lord and in the righteous heart of Boaz. Ruth felt a tremor run through her, a mixture of trepidation and a burgeoning sense of purpose. The path Naomi was outlining was unusual, certainly, but it resonated with a deep sense of rightness, a feeling that this was the very direction God had been subtly guiding them. It was a step into the unknown, a venture of faith that required her to lay bare her vulnerability and trust in the established order of her new home. "I will do as you say, my mother," Ruth pledged, her voice clear and firm, her gaze meeting Naomi's with unwavering resolve. She understood the weight of the tradition, the importance of preserving Mahlon's name and lineage, and the profound impact this act could have on her own life. The hope that flickered within Naomi's heart had ignited a steady flame within her own soul. Naomi's counsel was not merely about the mechanics of approaching Boaz, it was about the spiritual preparation, the inner disposition required for such a significant undertaking. She impressed upon Ruth the importance of humility, of not appearing demanding or presumptuous, but rather as a widow seeking the protection and fulfillment of a sacred duty. The act of uncovering Boaz's feet was a sign of vulnerability and a plea for covering, a metaphor for seeking his protection and his blessing. The request to spread the corner of his garment over her was a direct reference to the responsibilities of a redeemer, signifying his willingness to take her under his wing, to become her protector and provider, and to uphold the honor of her deceased husband. "Remember, Ruth," Naomi cautioned, her eyes reflecting the deepening twilight, "this is not a matter of personal desire alone, though your desire for security is righteous. It is about fulfilling the law, about honoring the memory of your husband and his family. Boaz's decision will be influenced not just by your presentation, but by his own adherence to the principles of our God and our traditions. He will consider his responsibility, his duty to the deceased, and his own standing within the community." Naomi's words were a testament to her own journey of faith. She had once been consumed by bitterness, her heart hardened by loss and displacement. But through Ruth's unwavering love and Boaz's unexpected kindness, she had rediscovered the enduring grace of God. Now, she was able to guide Ruth with a wisdom born not just of experience, but of a renewed spiritual understanding. She knew that the future of her beloved Ruth, and indeed the continuation of her family's legacy, rested on this precarious yet divinely ordained step. The night was descending, and with it, the moment of truth was drawing nearer. The counsel had been given. Now, it was time for action, for a leap of faith into the heart of an ancient custom that held the promise of a new beginning. The cool night air of the Bethlehem hills carried the scent of crushed barley and the lingering warmth of the day's sun. The dust, thick and golden, settled on the threshing floor, a silent testament to the bounty reaped. Here, under the vast expanse of a star-dusted sky, Boaz, the master of the harvest, sought a moment of rest. His men, their bodies weary from the long days of labor, had retreated, their boisterous songs and laughter fading into the distant hum of the sleeping village. Boaz, too, felt the profound satisfaction of a completed task, the sweet relief of knowing the grain was safe, the community provided for. He had spread his cloak and lay down, the gentle breeze rustling the dry stalks around him, a natural lullaby ushering him towards sleep. It was in this tranquil, almost sacred space that Ruth, guided by Naomi's counsel and her own unwavering resolve, made her approach. Her heart, a drumbeat against her ribs, echoed the anxious hope that had taken root within her. Each step across the uneven ground was measured, deliberate, an embodiment of the weighty tradition she was about to invoke. The moonlight cast long, dancing shadows, transforming the familiar landscape into something ethereal, a stage for a pivotal act. She moved with a reverence that belied the boldness of her undertaking, her every intention rooted in the principles Naomi had so carefully explained. The law of the kinsman redeemer, a concept that had once seemed distant and abstract, now pulsed with immediate, life-altering significance. She found him as Naomi had predicted, a figure of quiet strength even in slumber, his breathing deep and even. The air around him seemed to emanate a sense of peace and authority. Taking a deep, steadying breath, Ruth drew closer, her movements slow and almost imperceptible. The rough texture of the threshing floor beneath her bare feet was a grounding sensation, a connection to the earth that had sustained her through the harvest. She knelt beside him, the coarse fibers of the barley stalks brushing against her skin. The act of uncovering his feet was not one of indecency, but a profound, ancient gesture. It was a symbol of vulnerability, a silent declaration of her widowhood, her destitution, and her seeking of protection. It was a plea for him, as a man of standing and a potential redeemer, to cast his protective mantle over her, just as he would cover his own kin. The coarse wool of Boaz's garment, where Ruth gently drew it back from his feet, felt strangely significant, a barrier between her present uncertainty and a potential future of security. She lay down at his feet, not in a posture of dominion, but of submission, of seeking refuge. The darkness was a cloak, an ally in this moment, shrouding her actions while allowing the profound meaning to resonate. She was a stranger in this land, a widow twice over, her own ties severed by death and distance. Yet, in this ancient ritual, she found a voice, a way to express her deepest needs within the framework of the laws that governed this community. Her presence there, a solitary figure in the hushed night, was a prayer made tangible, an offering of her life and her future to the possibilities that lay within the kinsman-redeemer tradition. The weight of her Moabite heritage, the stigma she had sometimes felt, seemed to dissipate in the solemnity of the moment, replaced by the universal language of loss and the yearning for belonging. She was no longer just Ruth the Moabitess, but a widow in Israel, seeking the justice and compassion promised by their God and their laws. The stillness of the night was broken only by the soft rustling of the grain and the distant chirp of crickets. Ruth lay at Boaz's feet, her senses heightened, attuned to every shift in the air, every sound. The vulnerability of her position was immense, yet it was tempered by a profound sense of purpose. She was not acting out of rash impulse or personal ambition. Her actions were carefully considered, steeped in the wisdom of Naomi and the divine principles of the law. She was an embodiment of the ancient statutes designed to protect the widow, the orphan, and the land. Her humble posture was a testament to her respect for Boaz, for his position, and for the sacred duty he might be called upon to fulfill. She waited, her breath held, for the moment he would awaken, the moment when the silent plea would need to be articulated in words. Boaz stirred, a natural awakening rather than a startle. The coolness of the air on his feet was the first thing he registered, a subtle anomaly in the familiar comfort of his resting place. As his senses cleared, he became aware of a presence, a soft weight at his feet. His eyes opened, adjusting to the dim light filtering through the starry sky. He saw her then, a silhouette against the moonlit grain, Ruth. His mind, still tinged with the pleasant fatigue of the day, registered surprise, but not alarm. He knew Ruth, respected her diligence, and had been moved by her quiet dignity and her loyalty to Naomi. He recognized the symbolic gesture immediately. The uncovered feet, the woman lying at his feet, these were not casual occurrences. They spoke of a deliberate act, an invocation of the law of the kinsman-redeemer. He understood, with a clarity that transcended the surprise, that she was not there for any other reason. She was a widow, and he, by virtue of their kinship, was a potential redeemer. He remained still for a moment, allowing the implications to settle. He could have reacted with sternness, with dismissiveness, or even with anger. But Boaz was a man of integrity, a man who feared God and honored the traditions of his people. He saw not a presumptuous woman, but a widow in need, acting within the bounds of the law to secure her future and the continuation of her deceased husband's lineage. He knew the custom, the significance of her plea. It was a bold step for Ruth, requiring immense courage, but it was also a testament to her understanding of her obligations and her faith in the system that offered her protection. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice a low rumble in the quiet night, not a question of genuine ignorance, but a formal opening to the dialogue dictated by custom. It was a way to acknowledge her presence, to initiate the conversation without causing undue distress or embarrassment. He knew it was Ruth, but protocol demanded this initial query. Ruth, her heart leaping at the sound of his voice, her entire being focused on this critical juncture, responded with a quiet reverence that mirrored her posture. Her voice, though soft, carried the weight of her sincerity and the earnestness of her plea. "I am Ruth, your servant," she began, her words carefully chosen, echoing Naomi's instruction. "Spread the corner of your garment over me, for you are a redeemer of the inheritance." The request was simple, yet it encompassed a world of meaning. The corner of his garment. It represented his authority, his protection, his willingness to take her under his wing. It was a request for him to acknowledge his familial obligation, to extend his protection and provision, to marry her and thus ensure that her late husband Mahlon's name would not be erased from Israel. She was not asking for a casual favor, but for the fulfillment of a sacred duty, a legal and moral obligation that would benefit not only her but also the memory of her deceased husband and the integrity of the family line. Her plea was steeped in the understanding that this was not merely about her personal desire, but about upholding the principles of justice and compassion that were central to the Israelite faith. She presented herself not as a petitioner seeking charity, but as a rightful claimant under the ancient laws, a widow seeking the continuation of her husband's legacy. Boaz listened, his gaze fixed on her in the dim light. He saw the sincerity in her eyes, the vulnerability in her stance, and the profound respect for the law that guided her actions. He understood the gravity of her words, the silent plea for him to act as her goal, her kinsman redeemer. He knew that this was not a matter to be taken lightly. It involved not only Ruth and the memory of Mahlon, but also his own standing, his responsibilities to his family, and his adherence to God's commands. The threshing floor, usually a place of labor and celebration, had become the setting for a profound legal and personal negotiation, all conducted with a quiet dignity under the watchful eyes of the stars. He recognized the immense courage it had taken for Ruth to approach him in this manner, a foreign woman, a widow, stepping into the heart of an ancient tradition to secure her future. "The Lord bless you, my daughter," Boaz responded, his voice imbued with a newfound solemnity. "You have shown me even greater kindness in this last instance than in the first, by not going after younger men, whether poor or rich." His words were a recognition of her worth, a subtle acknowledgement that she had not sought the easy path or a partner based on superficial criteria. She had come to him, a man of years and standing, seeking the fulfillment of the law and the preservation of a legacy. He saw her loyalty to Naomi, her unwavering devotion to the memory of her husband, and her deep understanding of the customs of Israel, a testament to her character. He appreciated that she had not sought out younger men, perhaps more attractive prospects, but had come to him, acknowledging the familial tie and the legal responsibility. This showed a maturity and a deep understanding of the Redeemer's role, that it was not about personal preference but about fulfilling a duty. He continued, his gaze thoughtful, as he weighed the implications of her request. "Now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you all that you ask, for all the town knows that you are a woman of noble character." This was a crucial declaration. He was not dismissing her plea. He was acknowledging her virtue, her reputation within the community, which made her request even more compelling. Her character was an undeniable asset, a factor that would undoubtedly influence his decision. He was promising to act, but the specifics, the fulfillment of the law, would require a careful process. He was not yet committing to marriage, but to undertaking the responsibility of her redemption, which began with addressing her immediate needs and securing her future. His promise was a testament to his own noble character, for he was choosing to honor the law and protect a vulnerable woman, even when it might involve complexities. However, Boaz added, his tone shifting to one of practical consideration, "There is a Redeemer closer than I remain this night, and in the morning, if he will redeem you, good. Let him redeem you, but if he is not willing to redeem you, then I will redeem you, as the Lord lives. Rest here until morning." He was laying out the legal framework, the steps that had to be taken. The law stipulated that the closest kinsman had the first right of redemption. Boaz, though a relative, was not the nearest. He was bound by honor and law to offer the opportunity to the one who held precedence. This was not a rejection of Ruth, but a commitment to follow the established legal process with utmost integrity. He was demonstrating his understanding of the nuances of the Goel law, ensuring that he acted justly and according to all the established customs. Ruth listened, her heart a mixture of relief and renewed anticipation. Boaz's response was everything she could have hoped for. He had not turned her away. He had acknowledged her worth, promised to act, and most importantly, had recognized the legal process. She had placed her future in his hands, and he had responded with honor. The assurance that he would do all she asked, provided the closer redeemer did not, was a significant step. It meant that her plea had been heard, her situation understood, and her future, while still uncertain, was now in the hands of a man of great integrity. The night air, once filled with her anxious hope, now carried the quiet promise of resolution. She was a widow who had come seeking a redeemer, and she had found a man willing to uphold the law. She settled back down, her trust reaffirmed, the scent of the barley a comforting presence. The dawn would bring the next challenge, the confrontation with the closer redeemer, but for now, under the watchful stars and the promise of Boaz, she found a measure of peace. The threshing floor, a place of labor, had become a place of negotiation, of legal precedent, and of a woman's courageous plea for her future. The wind whispered through the grain, carrying with it the echoes of ancient laws and the quiet hope of a new beginning. Boaz, too, settled back into his slumber, his mind occupied with the weight of his newfound responsibility, the awareness that the dawn would bring a reckoning not only of grain but of lineage and legacy. He was a man of his word, and he would see this matter through with the fairness and justice that defined him. The harvest was complete, but the work of redemption was just beginning. The first rays of dawn, hesitant and pale, began to paint the eastern sky, chasing away the deepest indigo of night. On the threshing floor, Boaz stirred, the cool morning air a stark contrast to the warmth of his body. The encounter with Ruth, so profound in the darkness, lingered in his thoughts, not as a dream, but as a weighty reality. He looked at her, still resting at his feet, a figure of quiet grace even in her slumber. The decision made in the hushed hours of the night solidified within him. He would indeed act as her redeemer, but the law, a sacred covenant he held dear, had its own strictures. "Rise, my daughter," Boaz said, his voice gentle, yet carrying the authority of his position. Ruth stirred, her eyes fluttering open, the dawnlight revealing a mixture of apprehension and hope. Boaz offered her a reassuring smile, though his mind was already navigating the intricate path ahead. "It is time. I will go to the city gate and speak with the matter. Remain here until I return." He rose, the rough fibers of the barley brushing against his legs, a tangible reminder of the bounty he managed and the responsibilities that came with it. He gathered his simple cloak, the same one that had offered a symbolic covering to Ruth, and set off towards Bethlehem, the air thick with the promise of the day and the unfolding of an ancient duty. Boaz's journey to the city gate was not a leisurely stroll, but a purposeful stride. The familiar path, usually a route of commerce and community interaction, now felt like a gauntlet of legal obligation. He knew the man who held the primary right of redemption, a relative named Elimelech, after whom Boaz's own father had been named, a man of property and standing within the community. This kinsman, though distantly related, held the ancestral claim. The law was clear. The closest living male relative had the first opportunity to redeem the land and, by extension, the lineage. It was a system designed to keep property within families and to provide a safety net for widows and orphans, preventing their destitution and the dissipation of ancestral wealth. As Boaz approached the familiar bustle of the city gate, the sounds of early morning commerce, the bleating of sheep being brought to market, the calls of merchants setting up their stalls, the murmurs of men gathering for the day's discussions, assaulted his ears. This was the heart of Bethlehem's public life, the place where disputes were settled, business was struck, and the community's affairs were conducted. He sought out Elimelech, finding him engaged in conversation with a group of elders, their faces etched with the wisdom of experience. Boaz approached with respect, his heart steady. He was not coming as an adversary, but as an administrator of justice and a guardian of tradition. "Greetings, Elimelech," Boaz began, his voice clear and resonant, cutting through the ambient noise. "I have a matter of importance to discuss with you, concerning the lineage and possessions of our departed kinsman, Mahlon." He paused, allowing his words to settle, observing the flicker of recognition and perhaps a touch of curiosity in Elimelech's eyes. The mention of Mahlon, and by extension, his widow Ruth, would immediately signal the nature of the conversation. Boaz continued, "You know that Mahlon, son of Elimelech, died without an heir. And as you are the closest living relative, the law dictates that you have the first right to redeem the land and the family name." Elimelech nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. He was a man who understood the weight of tradition and the intricacies of inheritance. The land, fertile and productive, was valuable, and the obligation to redeem it, while burdensome, was also an opportunity to secure a portion of his family's legacy. He looked at Boaz, acknowledging the integrity of his approach. Boaz was known for his uprightness, his fairness, and his deep respect for God's law. Indeed, Boaz, Elimelech replied, his voice carrying a similar gravitas. I am aware of the law. The land of Mahlon, and indeed the responsibility that comes with it, falls under my purview as the next of kin. He gestured to the surrounding elders, including some who held positions of authority within the city council. We are here, ready to address such matters as they arise. Boaz, understanding that the situation required witnesses and formal declaration, nodded to the elders. Then let us proceed, for I have encountered a widow, Ruth, Mahlon's wife, who has returned from Moab. She has come to me seeking redemption. Boaz's gaze met Elimelech's directly. She has approached me under the law, and I have pledged to her that I will do all that is within my power to redeem her, provided there is no closer redeemer than I and you, Elimelech, are that closer redeemer. The weight of Boaz's words hung in the air. He was not merely informing Elimelech, he was formally presenting the situation, adhering to the legal protocol that ensured fairness and transparency. The mention of Ruth, a foreign woman, yet one of noble character, would have stirred interest. Boaz's own pledge, that he would do all within his power, underscored his personal commitment, a commitment that would be tested by Elimelech's decision. Elimelech considered Boaz's words, his mind weighing the implications. To redeem Mahlon's land meant taking on a significant financial obligation. It also meant accepting the responsibility of marrying Ruth, ensuring that Mahlon's name would not be forgotten in Israel and that his lineage would continue. This was not a decision to be made lightly, especially given Ruth's foreign origin, though Boaz's testament to her character would undoubtedly be a factor. You say she has come seeking redemption, Boaz, Elimelech stated, his eyes fixed on Boaz, seeking further clarity. And you have pledged to her. What is it that she seeks specifically? Boaz explained, she seeks the continuation of Mahlon's name, and the preservation of his inheritance. The law requires that her husband's name not be blotted out from his family and inheritance. Therefore, the Redeemer must marry her and raise up seed to his deceased brother. He then added, detailing his own commitment, I have told her that I will do this, but there is a Redeemer nearer than I. If he is willing to redeem her, then redeem her. But if he is not willing, then I, as the Lord lives, will redeem her. The elders, listening intently, nodded in agreement. They understood the gravity of the situation, the delicate balance between familial obligation, legal right, and compassion for the widow. Boaz had meticulously laid out the case, presenting it with an impartiality that belied his personal inclination to see Ruth provided for. He was acting not out of personal affection alone, but out of a deep-seated commitment to justice and the divine mandate. Elimelech turned to face the assembled elders, his expression now one of serious deliberation. He knew the land, he knew its value, and he knew the responsibility that came with it. He also knew that this was an opportunity, but perhaps one that came with more complications than he was willing to undertake. He looked at Boaz, a man of substance and integrity, a man who would undoubtedly fulfill his promise if given the chance. Boaz, Elimelech said, his voice steady, I have land to redeem, and I myself am a redeemer of the inheritance. However, there is a kinsman nearer than I. If he will redeem it for himself, then you redeem it, for I cannot redeem it myself. There was a subtle shift in the air as Elimelech uttered these words. He was not explicitly naming the kinsman nearer than I, but the implication was clear. Boaz, understanding the customary way of such matters, knew that Elimelech was referring to himself in the context of a different, even closer, kinship tie to Mahlon that he possessed, or was acting as a proxy for another closer relative. This was the moment of truth, the point where the legal right would be exercised or waived. Boaz, ever the astute observer and man of integrity, recognized the significance of Elimelech's declaration. He had presented the situation, Elimelech had been given the first right, and he had effectively renounced it, citing another, closer redeemer, or a prior claim that superseded his own willingness to proceed in this specific manner. This was a crucial step in the legal process, a formal declination of the Redeemer's obligation. Boaz acknowledged Elimelech's statement with a nod of understanding. Then I will redeem for myself the portion of the field that belonged to Mahlon, son of Elimelech, and also purchase it from the hand of Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of Mahlon, to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance. He then turned to the elders who had gathered, their presence lending an air of official sanction to the proceedings. You are witnesses this day, and all the people who are at the gate. We are making a public declaration, a commitment that will bind us according to the law. The process was swift and decisive. Boaz, with the approval of the elders and the implicit consent of Elimelech, began the formal transaction. He purchased the field from Ruth, a symbolic act that acknowledged her connection to the inheritance and secured her claim to a portion of it, as well as the right to sustenance. This act of purchase was not just a financial transaction, it was the legal mechanism by which Boaz assumed the responsibility of redemption. By buying the field, he was not only acquiring property but also taking on the obligation to care for Ruth and perpetuate Mahlon's name. The elders, their faces impassive but their minds attentive, watched as Boaz removed his sandal and presented it to Elimelech. This was the ancient, customary sign of relinquishing a right or confirming a transaction. It was a powerful visual representation of the transfer of responsibility. Elimelech accepted the sandal, a gesture that sealed his relinquishment of his claim. Be it known, Boaz declared, his voice ringing with the conviction of his promise, that this day you are witnesses that I have purchased from the hand of Naomi, through Ruth, all that belonged to Elimelech and all that belonged to Mahlon and Chilion. Moreover, I have taken Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of Mahlon, to be my wife, to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance, so that the name of the dead may not be cut off from among his brothers or from the gate of his place. You are witnesses this day. A collective murmur went through the crowd. The transaction was complete. Boaz, a man of honor and integrity, had not only secured the inheritance but had also pledged his life and name to Ruth. He had taken upon himself the role of the Redeemer, not out of obligation alone, but out of a deep respect for the law and a genuine appreciation for Ruth's character. The complexities of her foreign origin, the initial reluctance that might have been present in some, were superseded by the clear pronouncements of law and the testament to her virtue. Boaz then addressed the people directly, his gaze sweeping over their faces. You are witnesses this day, he reiterated, his voice strong. He knew that this public declaration was crucial. It ensured that the transaction was legal, recognized, and binding. It also served as a public affirmation of Ruth's new status, transforming her from a widow in a foreign land to a wife within a respected Israelite family. The crowd dispersed, their conversations buzzing with the news. Boaz, the respected landowner, had taken a foreign widow as his wife. It was an unusual union, perhaps, but one that was deeply rooted in the sacred laws of Israel, a testament to the God who protected the vulnerable and honored the faithful. Boaz felt a profound sense of relief, the weight of the impending decision lifted. He had acted with diligence and integrity, ensuring that the law was upheld and that Ruth and Naomi, both widows in need, would be provided for. His journey to the city gate, initiated by Ruth's courageous plea on the threshing floor, had culminated in a public affirmation of his commitment, a commitment that would weave his life and legacy with that of Ruth and the memory of Mahlon. He turned back towards the fields, the rising sun now casting a warm glow, a promise of the new day and the new life that was about to unfold. The harvest was complete, but the reaping of a new destiny, rooted in redemption and love, had just begun. The elders dispersed, their murmurs of approval and curiosity trailing behind them like the scent of dust stirred by a gentle breeze. Boaz, his heart a mixture of solemn satisfaction and burgeoning joy, turned to face Ruth. She stood a short distance away, her eyes, pools of quiet strength, fixed on him. The legal formalities, the pronouncements before the gatekeepers and the people of Bethlehem, had been the scaffolding of this moment, but it was the human element, the profound connection forged in shared trials and unwavering loyalty, that truly formed its foundation. Ruth, Boaz began, his voice resonating with a tenderness that had been carefully veiled during the public declaration. The law has been satisfied. The rights have been ceded. And now, by the grace of God and the traditions of our people, you are to become my wife. He extended a hand, his calloused fingers reaching out not with the urgency of possession, but with the gentle assurance of a promise kept. Come, he said, his gaze unwavering, and be welcomed into my house. Come and be my wife. Ruth's hand, still bearing the faint traces of barley dust, met his. It was a small gesture, a simple clasping of hands, yet it carried the weight of years of hardship, of loss, and now, of an unexpected, radiant hope. A hesitant smile bloomed on her lips, a fragile flower unfurling in the morning light. Her journey from Moab, a land of foreign gods and whispered fears, had been long and arduous. She had come seeking refuge, a meager inheritance, and perhaps a flicker of justice for her lost husband, Mahlon. What she found was something far greater, a kinsman's steadfastness, a community's recognition of her worth, and a love that transcended the boundaries of nation and custom. As they walked back towards Boaz's home, the rhythm of their footsteps seemed to echo the steady beat of their hearts. The threshing floor, once a place of desperate supplication, was now a distant memory, transformed by Boaz's honorable actions into a testament to God's intricate plan. Boaz spoke softly, his words painting a picture of their future, not as a duty or an obligation, but as a shared endeavor. He spoke of the home that awaited her, the welcome that would be extended to her, and the respect that would be her due. He spoke of Naomi, too, and the relief that would flood her aged heart. Naomi, her frail frame seated by the hearth, had been waiting, her prayers a silent hymn rising with the dawn. The anxious hours had stretched into an eternity, each moment a testament to the faith she had painstakingly nurtured even in the deepest valleys of despair. When the door opened and Boaz entered, with Ruth by his side, a radiant peace settled upon her features. The news had, of course, preceded them, carried on the tongues of those who had witnessed the proceedings at the gate. But to see them together, to witness the quiet understanding that passed between Boaz and Ruth, was to see a miracle unfold. Boaz knelt before Naomi, his strong hands gently taking hers. "Mother," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "the promise is fulfilled. Ruth is my wife, and she is yours, and she is Israel's. The name of Mahlon will not be forgotten. And through this union, God has granted us a new beginning." Tears welled in Naomi's eyes, not tears of sorrow, but of profound, overwhelming gratitude. They were tears that washed away the bitterness of loss, the sting of barrenness, and the ache of loneliness. "Boaz, my son," she whispered, her voice trembling, "you have shown a kindness to my family that is beyond measure. You have not turned away from us in our need. You have honored the law, yes, but you have done so with a heart that beats with true compassion. You have redeemed not only the land, but a life, a lineage, and a hope that I thought had long since withered." She turned to Ruth, her gaze filled with a mother's love, a love that now encompassed this foreign woman who had proven herself more loyal and more devoted than many a daughter of Israel. "And you, Ruth," Naomi continued, her voice gaining strength, "you have been a daughter to me in truth. You have clung to me, to my people, and to my God. And now, God has blessed you richly, as you have blessed us." Ruth, her own eyes shining with unshed tears, bowed her head. "My mother, you are my mother. And my God is your God. Whatever Boaz has done, he has done with your blessing, and with the blessing of the Lord. It is my joy to be your daughter, and to be his wife." The days that followed were filled with a quiet joy, a gentle unfolding of a new life. The news of the marriage rippled through Bethlehem, not with scandal or judgment, but with a sense of admiration for Boaz's integrity and a warmth towards Ruth. Her foreignness, which might have been a barrier, became, in this instance, a testament to the inclusive nature of God's covenant, a covenant that extended its grace to those who embraced it with a faithful heart. Boaz's household, already a place of respect and prosperity, now radiated a new sense of completeness. Ruth, once a stranger, found herself embraced, not just by Boaz, but by the community. She learned the ways of Israel, not as an outsider observing from afar, but as an integral part of the fabric of life. The marriage was not merely a legal union, it was a confluence of spirits, a deep and abiding love born from shared adversity and mutual respect. Boaz, a man of God, found in Ruth a partner who mirrored his own faith and devotion. Her steadfastness, her unwavering loyalty to Naomi and to the God of Israel, had captivated him from the moment he first encountered her in the barley fields. He saw in her a reflection of God's own faithfulness, a quiet strength that resonated deeply with his own character. He cherished her, not as a possession, but as a precious gift, a woman of noble character whose worth far exceeded any material treasure. Ruth, in turn, found in Boaz a safe harbor, a man of integrity and kindness who saw her not as a burden or an outsider, but as a woman worthy of love and respect. He honored her past, celebrated her present, and embraced their shared future. He shielded her from any lingering anxieties, his presence a constant source of reassurance. He treated her with a gentleness that spoke volumes, understanding the emotional landscape she navigated. He was not just a kinsman redeemer, he was a husband who cherished his wife, a man who understood the sanctity of their union. Their love story was not one of fiery passion that consumed all else, but a deep, abiding affection that grew and strengthened with each passing day. It was a love built on a foundation of shared values, a mutual commitment to God, and a profound appreciation for one another's character. They prayed together, worked together, and built their lives together, their union a testament to the redemptive power of God's love. Naomi watched them, her heart overflowing with a contentment that surpassed all her previous sorrows. She saw in their union the fulfillment of God's promises, not just to her, but to her entire lineage. The emptiness left by the death of her sons was being filled, not just by the continuation of their names, but by the creation of a new family, a family rooted in love, faith, and faithfulness. She had mourned for her lost sons, but now, she rejoiced for the life that was blossoming before her. She saw in Ruth the continuation of her hopes, and in Boaz, the embodiment of Israel's noblest ideals. It is as the women sang, Naomi mused one evening, as she watched Boaz and Ruth share a quiet meal, their hands occasionally brushing as they reached for a serving dish. They sang that Ruth was worth more than 7 sons. And in truth, she is. She brought blessing and redemption to our house, and Boaz, you have sealed that blessing with your love and your honorable heart. Boaz smiled, his gaze resting on Ruth. The Lord has blessed us abundantly, mother. Ruth's faithfulness paved the way, and the Lord has opened the path. It is a joy to serve him, and a joy to share this life with her. Ruth met Boaz's gaze, her smile radiant. And it is my joy to be a part of this household, to love you both, and to serve the Lord. Their lives became a quiet symphony of faith and love. Boaz continued to manage his fields, his generosity and wisdom evident in his dealings with his workers and the community. Ruth, a capable and diligent woman, managed the household with grace and efficiency, her kindness extending to all those who came under their roof. They lived out their faith in practical ways, their actions speaking louder than any sermon. They honored God in their home, their prayers a constant refrain, their gratitude a daily offering. The joy of their union was not a fleeting emotion, but a deep-seated peace that permeated their existence. It was the peace that comes from knowing one is living in accordance with God's will, from experiencing the fulfillment of His promises, and from sharing life with a beloved partner. The shadow of grief that had once loomed over Naomi's household was finally lifted, replaced by the bright light of a new dawn, a dawn that had been orchestrated by the hand of God, guided by human faithfulness, and sealed by a love that was pure and true. The story of Ruth and Boaz, a foreigner and an Israelite, a widow and a respected landowner, became a timeless testament to the redemptive power of love, the enduring strength of faithfulness, and the unfailing providence of God, who weaves together the seemingly disparate threads of human lives into a tapestry of beauty and purpose. Their union was a quiet miracle, a beacon of hope, and a celebration of the profound truth that in God's eyes, all who fear Him and do righteousness are accepted and blessed. The redemption Boaz offered was not merely a legal transaction, it was a profound act of love, a weaving of two lives into one, creating a legacy of faith that would echo through generations. The quiet days of their marriage settled into a harmonious rhythm, a melody of shared devotion and deepening affection. Boaz's fields continued to yield their bounty, a testament to his diligent stewardship and the Lord's favor. Ruth, no longer the widowed stranger but the cherished wife of a respected man, managed their home with a grace that spoke of her inherent nobility. Their days were filled with the simple, profound joys of a life lived in mutual respect and shared faith. Naomi, her heart now a vessel overflowing with gratitude, found solace and joy in their union, witnessing the continuation of a lineage she had once feared was lost to the barrenness of sorrow. The whispers that had once spoken of loss and hardship now spoke of blessing, of a foreigner who had found a home and a heritage, and of a kinsman whose integrity had woven a new tapestry of hope for their family. It was within this atmosphere of peace and burgeoning joy that the Lord bestowed his most precious gift. The promise of a child, a continuation of Mahlon's name and a testament to the faithfulness of Ruth and Boaz, began to unfold. The news rippled through their household with a hushed reverence, a sacred anticipation that settled over them like the dew on the fields. Naomi's eyes, which had witnessed so much sorrow, now shone with a radiant hope, her prayers for this new life echoing those she had offered for Ruth's safe passage and acceptance. Boaz, the sturdy oak of his household, found his heart softened by this tender new beginning, his strength now dedicated to nurturing not only his wife but the life blossoming within her. Ruth, though her physical strength was being taxed, found an inner resilience that drew from the very source of her faith. She continued her tasks with a quiet diligence, her spirit uplifted by the knowledge that she was part of a divine plan, a vessel through which God's promises would be further realized. Her foreign birth faded further into the background, replaced by the universal language of impending motherhood, a blessing that transcended all earthly distinctions. She found strength in Boaz's unwavering support, his gentle hands often resting on her growing belly, his voice a soothing balm as he spoke of their future, of the child who would be a joy to them all. The women of Bethlehem, who had rejoiced in the integrity of Boaz and the loyalty of Ruth, now joined in a chorus of communal blessing. They visited Ruth, bringing gifts and words of encouragement, their stories of childbirth a shared experience that bound them together. They spoke of the favor of God upon barren wombs, of the miracles he had wrought in the lives of his faithful. Their faith was a collective testament to the belief that no promise of God would ever fail, that his timing was always perfect, and that even in what seemed like the deepest despair, new life and hope could bloom. The community, which had witnessed the formal redemption of Ruth and Boaz, now stood as silent witnesses to a deeper, more profound redemption, the gift of life itself, a continuation of God's covenantal faithfulness. As the months drew to a close, the anticipation in Boaz's home reached a peak. Naomi, her years of sorrow now a distant memory, was a constant presence, her wisdom and experience a source of comfort to Ruth. She spoke of the blessings of the land, of the fertility of the soil mirroring the fertility of the womb, a reminder that God's provision extended to every aspect of life. Boaz, while busy with the demands of his harvest, ensured that Ruth was attended to with the utmost care, his heart already bound to the child who was yet to be born. He saw in this impending birth not just a personal joy, but a fulfillment of ancient prophecies, a thread in the grand tapestry of God's redemptive work. And then, the moment arrived. In the quiet sanctity of their home, amidst the prayers and the loving support of Naomi, Ruth brought forth a son. The cries of the newborn were not just the sounds of a baby entering the world, they were a proclamation of God's faithfulness, a resounding affirmation of his enduring love. The women who had gathered rejoiced, their voices raised in thanksgiving. "A son has been born to Naomi," they exclaimed, their words echoing the sentiments of the entire community. "He will renew your life and be your support in your old age, for he is the son of your daughter-in-law, Ruth, who loves him and who is better to you than 7 sons. Their joyous pronouncements were a recognition of the profound blessing that had arrived, a confirmation that the hardships had paved the way for an even greater joy. Boaz, his face etched with a mixture of awe and overwhelming love, took the tiny infant into his strong arms. This child, born of his love for Ruth and of God's grace, represented more than just the continuation of his own line. He was a link in a chain that stretched back to the patriarchs, a living testament to the covenantal promises that had been made to Abraham and his descendants. He saw in the infant's tiny hands, in his innocent breath, the future of Israel, a future that was being shaped by acts of faith and loyalty, by the quiet weaving of God's purposes into the lives of ordinary people. Naomi, her frail form trembling with emotion, looked upon the child. This grandson, this son of Ruth, was the embodiment of her restored hope. The bitterness of her widowhood, the pain of her son's untimely deaths, all seemed to melt away in the face of this vibrant new life. She had come from Bethlehem an empty-handed widow, filled with grief. Now, she was surrounded by the blessings of family, by the tangible evidence of God's redemptive grace. She named the child Obed, a name that signified worshipper, or servant, a name that echoed her own renewed devotion and a testament to the child's destined purpose. The birth of Obed was more than a family event, it was a sacred moment in the history of Israel. For in this child, the lineage of Boaz and Ruth, a line that embraced both the Israelite heritage of Boaz and the Moabite heritage of Ruth, would find its continuation. This was not just a personal triumph, but a step in the unfolding divine narrative. Obed, the son of Boaz and Ruth, would grow and flourish, his life a testament to the enduring power of faith that transcended national boundaries and personal tragedy. He would become the father of Jesse, and Jesse, in turn, would father David, the shepherd boy who would rise to become the greatest king of Israel. The humble birth of Obed in Bethlehem was, in essence, the quiet inception of a royal line. It was a profound illustration of how God, in his infinite wisdom, could take the seemingly insignificant, a widowed Moabite woman, a righteous Israelite landowner, and weave them into the very fabric of his grand design. The story of Ruth, the foreigner who clung to the God of Israel, and Boaz, the kinsman who acted with righteousness and love, was a testament to a God who saw beyond human limitations, who found value in loyalty and devotion, and who used even the most unexpected circumstances to fulfill his eternal purposes. Obed's upbringing was steeped in the traditions of Israel, nurtured by the love of his parents and the wisdom of his grandmother. He learned the stories of his ancestors, of the patriarchs, and of the covenant God who had guided their steps. He grew up hearing of his mother's remarkable journey, of her unwavering loyalty and her steadfast faith. He understood that his very existence was a miracle, a testament to the redemptive power of God that had brought his parents together. Boaz, in his role as a father and a patriarch, instilled in Obed a deep respect for the law, a commitment to justice, and a profound reverence for the God of Israel. Ruth, with her quiet strength and her profound understanding of God's grace, taught him the importance of compassion, the beauty of loyalty, and the power of humble service. As Obed grew, he embodied the virtues of both his parents. He possessed Boaz's strength of character and his sense of responsibility, coupled with Ruth's gentle spirit and her deep-seated piety. He was known in Bethlehem for his kindness, his fairness, and his unwavering devotion to God. He followed in his father's footsteps, not just in managing the fields and the household, but in his commitment to upholding the principles of righteousness that had defined Boaz's life. He was a man who understood that true wealth lay not in possessions, but in a right relationship with God and a commitment to serving others. The legacy of Ruth and Boaz lived on through their son, Obed. Their story, once a tale of hardship and redemption, had become a foundation for future generations. It served as a constant reminder that God's favor was not limited by birth or nationality, but by the willingness of the heart to embrace his ways. The thread of faithfulness, so strongly woven by Ruth and Boaz, was now passed on to Obed, a thread that would continue to be spun through the generations, leading ultimately to the establishment of a kingdom that would reflect the very principles of justice and mercy that had characterized their lives. The birth of Obed was a pivotal moment, a quiet testament to God's ongoing work, a demonstration of his power to bring forth life, hope, and even royalty from the most humble of beginnings, all through the unwavering commitment of those who chose to trust in him. His existence was a living testament to the fact that God's plan was not limited to grand pronouncements or sweeping victories, but could be seen in the intimate moments of family life, in the birth of a child, and in the continuation of a faithful lineage. Chapter 8. Echoes Through Time, Legacy and Faith. The tapestry of faith, woven through generations, often features threads of extraordinary courage, of individuals called to stand against overwhelming odds. While the lineage of Obed, born of Ruth and Boaz, continued to shape the destiny of Israel, leading ultimately to the rise of King David, the divine narrative wasn't confined to a single bloodline or a singular nation. The echoes of faith, of righteous intervention, resounded far beyond the borders of the Promised Land, reaching into the heart of another mighty empire, where a woman of humble origins would rise to become a queen and, through her bravery, the savior of an entire people. This is the story of Esther, a queen whose name became synonymous with unwavering courage and a testament to God's hidden hand in the affairs of humanity. Esther's story, though set centuries after the time of Ruth and Boaz, shares a profound resonance with their narrative. Both women, though from vastly different backgrounds and circumstances, found themselves in pivotal moments where their faith and their willingness to act were instrumental in the preservation and flourishing of God's people. Just as Ruth, a foreigner, clung to the God of Israel and found refuge and purpose, Esther, an orphaned Jewish girl named Hadassah, was chosen by Providence to ascend to the throne of the Persian Empire. Her story is not merely a historical account, it is a powerful illustration of how God can elevate the seemingly insignificant to positions of immense influence for his greater purposes. The precariousness of the Jewish people's existence in the diaspora was a constant undercurrent of their history. Scattered across vast empires, they often faced suspicion, prejudice, and the ever-present threat of persecution. In the sprawling, opulent, and often capricious world of the Persian Empire under King Ahasuerus, Xerxes I, this vulnerability was amplified. It was into this volatile environment that Esther, guided by her wise and devoted cousin Mordecai, found herself. Mordecai, a devout Jew, had raised Esther after her parents' death, instilling in her the traditions and faith of their ancestors. This upbringing, grounded in humility and adherence to divine law, would prove to be the bedrock of her strength when unimaginable pressures were placed upon her. The ascent of Esther to the queen's throne was no accident of fate, but a testament to her beauty, grace, and, as it would later be revealed, her extraordinary inner fortitude. When Queen Vashti was deposed, a vast search was initiated for a successor. Esther, presented to the king by Hegai, the chamberlain, captured Ahasuerus's favor. Yet, throughout this process, Mordecai's crucial instruction resonated: do not reveal your people or your kindred, for Mordecai had warned you not to tell. This counsel, born of a deep understanding of the precarious position of Jews in Persia, necessitated a veil of secrecy. Esther, the Jewish orphan, became Esther, the Persian queen, a hidden identity that would later become her greatest asset. The serene, yet precarious, existence Esther established as queen was shattered by the malevolent machinations of Haman, an Agagite official of immense power and pride. Haman's hatred for the Jews, a deep-seated, almost pathological animosity, festered when Mordecai, steadfast in his refusal to bow down to him, remained a solitary figure of defiance in the palace courtyard. This perceived slight ignited Haman's fury, leading him to hatch a genocidal plot. Driven by an insatiable desire for vengeance, he secured the king's consent to a decree that would annihilate all Jews throughout the empire on a single, devastating day. The date, chosen by Lot Pur, became the very name of the festival that would forever commemorate this event, Purim. The news of Haman's decree, reaching Mordecai and the Jewish communities, plunged them into despair. The empire that had seemingly offered a degree of safety was now poised to become their tomb. Sackcloth and ashes, fasting and weeping became the outward expressions of their profound grief and fear. It was in this moment of existential crisis that Mordecai's faith, and his deep understanding of Esther's unique position, compelled him to act. He sent word to Esther, urging her to go before the king, to plead for her people, to intercede on their behalf. This was the ultimate test, not just for Esther, but for the very essence of her hidden identity and her commitment to her people. The risks were astronomical. To approach the king unsummoned was punishable by death, a law from which only those who received a golden scepter were exempt. Even for the queen, this was not a trivial matter, it was a gamble with her life and the lives of her entire people. Mordecai's words, however, cut to the core of her responsibility: do not think that because you are in the king's house you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this? These words were a divine charge, a profound reminder that her elevated status was not merely for personal comfort or power, but for a purpose far greater than herself. They echo the sentiment found in many biblical narratives, where God raises individuals to meet specific challenges. Like Moses at the burning bush, or David facing Goliath, Esther was called to step into a role that demanded immense courage and faith. Her response was not one of immediate compliance, but of strategic deliberation. She understood the gravity of the situation and the need for wisdom. Esther's strategy was a masterpiece of calculated risk and profound understanding of human nature, particularly that of King Ahasuerus. She did not rush into the king's presence with accusations or pleas. Instead, she asked Mordecai to gather all the Jews in Susa to fast for 3 days, along with her own maids. This communal act of prayer and fasting underscored the seriousness of the situation and sought divine intervention before any human action was taken. It was a recognition that ultimate victory came not from human might, but from God's power. Following the 3 days of fasting, Esther, now adorned in her royal robes, presented herself in the inner court of the palace. The king, upon seeing her, was pleased and extended the golden scepter. This moment was critical. It signaled that she had not incurred his wrath. She then invited the king and Haman to a banquet. At this banquet, she reiterated her invitation for the following day, a subtle but significant move that kept the king's attention and heightened Haman's sense of importance, further fueling his arrogance. During the second banquet, when the king, in a state of exhilaration and curiosity, asked Esther what her request was, she finally revealed her true identity and the horrific plot against her people. Her speech was a delicate balance of courage and diplomacy. She began by identifying herself as Jewish and then, with immense emotional weight, revealed Haman's murderous intent. She stated, "For we are to be sold, I and my people, to destruction, and to death, and to annihilation. If we had been sold merely as male and female slaves, I would have held my tongue, but a loss like that cannot be compensated for, and the destroyer will not benefit the king." The king's reaction was one of shock and outrage. Haman, who had been so confident, so puffed up with his own importance, was suddenly exposed in his treachery. The very gallows he had prepared for Mordecai were, by a twist of divine providence, used for his own execution. The tables had turned with astonishing speed, a testament to the unseen forces at play. The king, enraged by Haman's deceit and the realization of the grave injustice he had almost sanctioned, issued a counter-decree. This counter-decree was not merely a revocation of Haman's order. It was a radical empowerment of the Jewish people. They were granted the right to defend themselves, to fight against those who sought to harm them. This turned what was meant to be a day of annihilation into a day of deliverance and, for some, a day of righteous retribution. The Jews of Persia, armed and united, were able to defend their lives and establish their right to exist. The story of Esther is not simply a tale of a daring queen or a wicked villain. It is a profound theological statement about God's providence and his unwavering commitment to his people, even when they are scattered and vulnerable. Esther, in her position of power, became an instrument of God's deliverance. Her courage in facing the king, her strategic brilliance, and her willingness to risk everything were not acts of human heroism alone, but were empowered by a deep faith and a sense of divine calling. Her legacy is multifaceted. First, she is a symbol of courage and bravery. She demonstrated that fear can be overcome by faith and that even in the face of overwhelming opposition, one person's actions, guided by divine purpose, can change the course of history. Her story inspires individuals to stand up for what is right, even when it is difficult or dangerous. It reminds us that we are not powerless in the face of injustice. Second, Esther's story is a powerful testament to divine intervention. While the narrative focuses on her actions, it is clear that there is a guiding hand at work. The opportune moment, the king's favor, Haman's overconfidence, all suggest a divine orchestration. This aspect of her story reassures believers that God is active in the world, even when his presence is not explicitly seen or felt. He works through human agents, through seemingly chance occurrences, to bring about his purposes. Third, Esther's legacy underscores the importance of identity and faithfulness. In a world that often pressures individuals to conform or to hide their true selves, Esther, by embracing her Jewish identity at the critical moment, fulfilled her destiny. Her willingness to be known as Jewish, and to fight for her people, highlights the importance of embracing one's heritage and standing firm in one's convictions, especially when those convictions are rooted in faith. The festival of Purim, celebrated to this day, is a vibrant and joyous commemoration of Esther's bravery and God's miraculous deliverance. The reading of the Megillah, the scroll of Esther, the exchange of gifts, the festive meals, all serve as tangible reminders of this pivotal event. It is a celebration of life, of resilience, and of the enduring power of faith to overcome even the most dire circumstances. In the broader tapestry of biblical narratives, Esther's story finds its place alongside other accounts of God's faithfulness to his people. Just as Ruth's loyalty and perseverance led to the continuation of a significant lineage, Esther's courage and strategic action saved an entire nation from annihilation. Both women, though separated by time and circumstance, exemplify the qualities that God honors: loyalty, faith, courage, and a willingness to act according to his will. The lessons from Esther's life resonate profoundly with contemporary readers. In a world that often feels chaotic and uncertain, where individuals and communities face threats to their well-being, her story offers a beacon of hope. It teaches us that hidden strengths can emerge in times of crisis. Esther's unassuming background and hidden identity did not diminish her capacity for courage and leadership. We too may possess strengths we are unaware of, which can be revealed when we are called to act. Strategic action is often guided by prayer and fasting. Esther's approach was not impulsive. She sought divine guidance and communal support before acting, demonstrating that wisdom and faith are often intertwined. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. Esther certainly faced immense fear, yet she chose to obey Mordecai and approach the king, understanding the potential consequences. This is the essence of true bravery. God's providence can be seen even in seemingly secular institutions. Esther rose to power within a pagan empire, yet God used this secular structure and the king's authority to protect his people. This reminds us that God's hand is not limited to religious settings. Standing for one's identity and community is a sacred duty. Esther's willingness to risk her life for her people is an enduring example of solidarity and faithfulness. The story of Esther, the queen who saved a nation, is more than just an ancient tale. It is a living testament to the power of faith, courage, and divine intervention. Her legacy continues to inspire generations to believe that even in the darkest of hours, a single voice, empowered by faith and guided by purpose, can bring about salvation and change the course of history. It is a reminder that the echoes of faith, once set in motion, can resound through time, offering hope and strength to all who will listen. Her narrative serves as a vital connection point, showing that the same God who favored Ruth and Boaz, and established the lineage of David, was also at work in the heart of the Persian Empire, orchestrating a salvation that continues to be celebrated, and to inspire, to this very day. The hushed air of Bethlehem, once filled with the lament of loss, had gradually softened. The grief that had clung to Naomi like a shroud, a heavy mantle woven from the deaths of her husband and sons, had not vanished, but it had begun to recede, making space for the quiet miracle of Ruth's presence. It was a bond forged not in the easy currents of shared history, but in the turbulent waters of displacement and sorrow, a testament to a loyalty that defied the customary ties of blood and homeland. Naomi, a woman whose life had been so irrevocably altered, found in Ruth not just a daughter-in-law, but a kindred spirit, a living embodiment of the promise that even after the deepest winter, spring can return. Ruth, herself a stranger in a land she had never known, carried within her a spirit as resilient as the barley stalks that swayed in the Judean fields. She had left her Moabite homeland, her family, and the gods of her people, not out of folly, but out of a profound conviction that had taken root in her heart. It was a conviction that had first been nurtured by the quiet dignity of Naomi, and later, by the unwavering faith of the God of Israel. To Naomi, Ruth's commitment was a revelation, a constant, tender reminder of a faithfulness that had surpassed all expectations. She saw in Ruth's actions not merely an obligation to a grieving widow, but a deep-seated acceptance of a new heritage, a new people, and a new God. This embrace was not a passive surrender, but an active, vibrant adoption, a conscious weaving of her own life into the fabric of Israel's destiny. The days following their return to Bethlehem were a delicate dance between the memories of Elimelech and his sons, and the burgeoning hope that Ruth represented. Naomi, still steeped in the bitterness of her losses, had initially felt stripped of everything. Her name, Mara, the bitter, seemed to echo the desolation in her soul. Yet, with Ruth by her side, her world began to regain its color. Ruth's diligent work in the fields, her gentle spirit, and her unwavering devotion were balm to Naomi's wounded heart. She watched, with a mixture of awe and gratitude, as Ruth navigated the customs of Bethlehem, her foreignness gradually giving way to a respected presence. This was not merely about survival, it was about finding a new kind of life, a new sense of belonging. The story of Naomi and Ruth became a whispered legend in Bethlehem, a tale of two women who, against all odds, found solace and purpose in each other. It was a narrative that transcended personal tragedy, illustrating the profound strength of chosen family. In a society where lineage and kinship were paramount, their bond stood as a powerful counterpoint, demonstrating that loyalty and love could transcend even the most formidable barriers. Naomi, who had returned empty, found herself overflowing with the richness of Ruth's presence. Ruth, who had left her homeland seeking refuge, found a home, a family, and a future that was richer and more secure than she could have ever imagined. Their story served as a quiet sermon in the heart of the community, a living testament to the idea that faith, once embraced, can lead to unexpected blessings. Ruth's decision to adopt the God of Israel was not a mere intellectual assent, it was a profound spiritual transformation. She found in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob a covenant of love and faithfulness that resonated with her own loyal heart. This adoption of faith, so complete and so sincere, was the cornerstone of her integration into Israelite life. It was this deep spiritual connection that not only bound her to Naomi but also opened the door to her eventual union with Boaz, a union that would prove pivotal for the continuation of David's lineage. Naomi's role in this was not one of passive observation. She was Ruth's guide, her confidant, her unwavering advocate. She had, in her grief, felt abandoned by God, but Ruth's unwavering faith and her own deepening connection to the divine began to mend that broken trust. Naomi witnessed firsthand the transformative power of a life lived in obedience to God's commands, a power that radiated from Ruth. She saw how Ruth's diligence in the fields, her respect for Boaz, and her own willingness to be guided by Naomi's counsel were all reflections of a heart aligned with divine principles. This was more than just good behavior, it was the fruit of a spirit deeply rooted in faith. The initial hardship, the barrenness that Naomi had so acutely felt, began to yield to a harvest of abundance. Ruth's gleaning in Boaz's fields was not just about gathering grain for their sustenance, it was about the symbolic reaping of blessings that God had ordained. Boaz, a man of integrity and kindness, recognized the exceptional character of Ruth, not just as a laborer, but as a woman of virtue and deep faith. His interactions with her, guided by the laws of hospitality and compassion, soon blossomed into a profound respect, and then into love. Naomi, observing this unfolding relationship, felt a resurgence of joy that she had thought long lost. The act of redemption, the subsequent marriage of Ruth and Boaz, was a pivotal moment, solidifying the bond between Naomi and Ruth in a way that was both legally and emotionally profound. Boaz, acting as a kinsman redeemer, not only secured Ruth's future and that of her deceased husband's lineage but also, in essence, redeemed Naomi's household from its desolation. Through this union, Naomi's hopes for a future, for grandchildren, for the continuation of her family name, were not only restored but magnified. The bitterness of her loss was being systematically replaced by the sweetness of new life and a secured inheritance. The birth of Obed, the son of Ruth and Boaz, was the ultimate affirmation of their shared journey. For Naomi, this child was more than just a grandson, he was the physical manifestation of God's grace and faithfulness. He represented a new beginning, a bridge between the past sorrow and a future filled with promise. The women of Bethlehem, who had initially sympathized with Naomi's plight, now rejoiced with her, celebrating the birth of Obed and recognizing him as a sign of God's favor upon this remarkable woman and her devoted Moabitess daughter. They declared, "A son has been born to Naomi." This was not merely a statement of fact but a recognition of Naomi's restored joy and the divine intervention that had orchestrated this miracle. The legacy of Naomi and Ruth extends far beyond the confines of their personal story. Their narrative serves as an enduring testament to the power of loyalty, the strength of chosen family, and the redemptive grace of God. It illustrates that faith is not a static possession but a dynamic force that can transform lives, redraw destinies, and create a future where none seemed possible. Ruth's willingness to embrace a new culture, a new people, and a new faith, and Naomi's ability to find hope again through her unwavering love, are lessons that resonate through the ages. They remind us that even in the face of profound loss and displacement, true belonging and a future can be found, not just through blood ties, but through the profound connections of the heart and the unwavering embrace of divine providence. Their intertwined lives became a cornerstone of the lineage that would eventually lead to King David, a testament to how God can use the most unlikely circumstances and the most faithful of individuals to weave his grand tapestry of salvation. The echoes of their devotion, their courage, and their faith continue to reverberate, a timeless reminder that love and loyalty, when rooted in God, can indeed conquer all. The tapestry of faith woven through the generations is rich with figures whose lives exemplify courage in the face of overwhelming odds. While the stories of Naomi and Ruth speak to the enduring strength found in loyalty and love amidst personal devastation, the annals of Israel's history are also illuminated by the fiery spirit of Deborah, a woman whose name echoes with the resonance of divine justice and unyielding strength. Her legacy is not merely that of a wise counselor or a compassionate leader. She was a prophetess, a judge, and a warrior, a multifaceted beacon of God's power that guided the Israelites through one of their darkest periods. Her life serves as a profound testament to how divine inspiration can manifest in unexpected vessels, shattering societal expectations and forging paths to national deliverance. Deborah's story unfolds during a time when the tribes of Israel had once again fallen into a cycle of disobedience, incurring the wrath of God and suffering under the oppressive hand of Jabin, the king of Canaan, and his ruthless general, Sisera. For 20 long years, the Israelites endured this brutal subjugation, their spirit crushed, their land ravaged, and their cries for deliverance seemingly lost in the din of their oppressors' chariots. It was in this climate of despair and fear that Deborah emerged, not from the ranks of seasoned warriors or powerful elders, but as a prophetess, a woman who received her authority directly from the Almighty. Her dwelling place, under the palm tree between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim, became a sanctuary of hope, a place where the oppressed could bring their grievances and seek the wisdom of God. The scriptures paint a vivid picture of Deborah's role. She judged Israel, meaning she presided over legal disputes and rendered judgments that were both fair and divinely guided. But her influence extended far beyond the courtroom. As a prophetess, she was a conduit for God's word, a voice that spoke truth to power, even when that truth was difficult to hear. Her pronouncements carried the weight of divine authority, inspiring confidence and directing the course of action for a people adrift in fear and uncertainty. She was, in essence, the spiritual and judicial heart of a nation struggling to survive. What makes Deborah's story so compelling is her unhesitating obedience to God's will, even when it demanded extraordinary bravery. When God instructed her to summon Barak, a commander from the tribe of Naphtali, and deliver a message of impending liberation, Deborah did not shrink from the task. She did not question the divine mandate, instead, she conveyed it with clarity and conviction. "Has not the Lord, the God of Israel, commanded you?" she asked Barak, her voice firm, reminding him of the divine backing for their planned rebellion. However, Barak, though a capable leader, harbored a deep-seated fear of Sisera and his formidable army, particularly his 900 iron chariots, a terrifying symbol of Canaanite military might. He confessed his trepidation to Deborah, saying, "If you go with me, I will go, but if you do not go with me, I will not go." This request placed Deborah in a precarious position, one that challenged the prevailing social norms of her time. Women were not typically expected to participate in warfare, let alone lead armies into battle. Yet, Deborah's response was not one of hesitation or apology. Instead, she met Barak's plea with a declaration that underscored her unwavering commitment to God's plan and her willingness to embrace her divinely appointed role, even if it meant venturing into uncharted territory. "I will surely go with you," she declared, "but the glory on this expedition will not be yours, because the Lord will hand Sisera over to a woman." This prophecy foretold not only her participation but also the ultimate victory. subtly hinting that the decisive blow would be struck by a woman, a testament to God's ability to achieve his purposes through the most unexpected means. Deborah's presence on the battlefield was not merely symbolic, it was a strategic and spiritual imperative. Her journey with Barak to Mount Tabor galvanized the Israelite forces. As they gathered, the news of Deborah's involvement spread, fueling their courage and solidifying their resolve. The presence of their prophetess and judge, a woman of immense spiritual authority, instilled a sense of divine favor that no earthly army could replicate. It was a powerful demonstration that their fight was not just against a human king but a battle aligned with God's will, a sacred undertaking blessed from above. The ensuing battle was a stunning display of divine intervention and strategic brilliance. As Sisera's army advanced, a torrential downpour, seemingly orchestrated by God, turned the dry terrain into a quagmire. The iron chariots, the very symbol of Sisera's might and terror, became bogged down and useless, their advantage nullified by the sudden fury of the elements. This meteorological anomaly created chaos and disarray within the Canaanite ranks, making them vulnerable to the onslaught of the Israelite warriors. The victory was not solely due to human strength or tactical prowess, it was a clear manifestation of God's power on behalf of his people, a resounding affirmation of Deborah's prophecy. But the story of Deborah's strength and God's deliverance does not end with the defeat of the army on the battlefield. The narrative continues with the pursuit of Sisera, who, in his desperation, fled the scene of his ignominious defeat. He sought refuge in the tent of Yael, the wife of Eber the Kenite, a man who had a peace treaty with King Jabin. Yael, a woman of cunning and courage, recognized the opportune moment to strike a decisive blow against their oppressor. She welcomed Sisera into her tent, offering him milk and a blanket to conceal him. When he fell into a deep sleep from exhaustion and the milk he had consumed, Yael took a tent peg and a hammer, and with a swift, powerful blow, drove the peg through his temple, killing him instantly. Thus, the prophecy that the glory of the victory would belong to a woman was fulfilled, not by Deborah in direct combat, but by Yael, an act of bravery that cemented the complete deliverance of Israel. The aftermath of this victory was a period of peace and prosperity for Israel that lasted for 40 years. The oppressive reign of Jabin was ended, and the Israelites were once again free to worship their God and live in their land without fear. Deborah's song of victory, recorded in the Book of Judges, is a powerful testament to her character and her unwavering faith. It is a hymn of praise that recounts God's mighty deeds, celebrating the courage of the Israelites, the treachery of their enemies, and the instruments of their deliverance, including herself and Yael. Her words, "The villages in Israel were deserted until I, Deborah, arose, until I arose, a mother for Israel," speak volumes about her maternal leadership, her deep connection to her people, and her pivotal role in their revival. Deborah's legacy extends far beyond her immediate impact on the Israelites. She stands as an enduring symbol of female leadership, challenging the patriarchal structures of her time and demonstrating that wisdom, courage, and divine authority are not bound by gender. Her story continues to inspire women and men alike, proving that leadership can emerge from unexpected places and that unwavering obedience to God's will can lead to transformative change on a national scale. She embodies the principle that true strength lies not in physical might alone, but in a deep-seated faith that empowers individuals to act with conviction and decisiveness, even in the face of overwhelming opposition. In an era where societal expectations often limited the roles of women, Deborah carved out a position of immense respect and authority. She was not merely a wife or a mother, though her song speaks of her as a mother for Israel. She was a prophetess who communed with God, a judge who dispensed justice, and a strategist who inspired an army to victory. Her life serves as a potent reminder that God can anoint anyone, regardless of their background or social standing, to carry out his purposes. Her willingness to embrace her calling, to stand tall in the face of adversity, and to lead her people to freedom is a narrative that transcends time, offering a timeless lesson in courage, faith, and the boundless capacity for strength that resides within the human spirit when aligned with the divine. The echoes of her voice, the pronouncements of her prophecies, and the triumph of her leadership continue to resonate, a powerful testament to the enduring strength and divine justice embodied by Deborah, the mother of Israel. The grand tapestry of Israel's history, woven with threads of triumph and tribulation, is richly adorned with the lives of women whose faith illuminated the darkest hours and whose resilience shaped the destiny of a nation. While the sagas of Naomi and Ruth speak of unwavering loyalty and the rediscovery of hope in the face of profound loss, and the vibrant legacy of Deborah resounds with the echoes of divine justice and potent leadership, these narratives, though distinct in their settings and challenges, are interwoven by a singular, radiant strand, the intricate workings of divine providence. These women, each in her own time and circumstance, were not merely passive recipients of fate, but active participants in a grand, unfolding plan, their choices and courage serving as crucial fulcrums upon which history turned. Consider the poignant journey of Esther. In the opulent, yet perilous, courts of Persia, a young Jewish orphan named Hadassah, destined by the Almighty for a purpose far grander than she could have ever imagined, found herself thrust into a position of immense influence. Renamed Esther, she ascended to the pinnacle of power as queen, a role fraught with hidden dangers and the constant threat of exposure. Her uncle, Mordecai, a man of deep faith and keen foresight, recognized the precariousness of their people's existence in the diaspora. He understood that their survival was not merely a matter of political maneuvering or human strength, but a testament to God's enduring favor. When Haman, a vizier consumed by pride and venomous hatred, devised a plot to annihilate every Jewish man, woman, and child throughout the vast Persian Empire, it was Esther, guided by Mordecai's urgent plea, who stood at the precipice of disaster. Her decision to approach the king, unbidden and risking her very life, was an act of breathtaking faith. The biblical narrative elegantly captures this pivotal moment, highlighting that Esther's elevation to queen was not a mere stroke of luck, but a deliberate, though perhaps subtle, orchestrating of events by a higher power. Mordecai's now famous declaration, "And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this?" Esther 4:14 encapsulates the essence of divine providence. It suggests that Esther's presence in that specific place, at that critical juncture, was no accident. God's hand, unseen but undeniably present, had guided her path, positioning her as the shield and savior of her people. Her willingness to step into the unknown, to risk everything for the sake of her heritage, demonstrated a profound trust in God's ability to work through her, even when the odds seemed insurmountably stacked against them. The intricate dance of power within the Persian court, the king's capricious moods, the timely discovery of Mordecai's past service, all these elements, when viewed through the lens of faith, reveal the meticulous, almost invisible, hand of providence weaving together a scenario that would ultimately thwart annihilation and secure the survival of the Jewish people. The threads connecting Esther's precarious triumph to the enduring faith of Naomi and Ruth are both profound and deeply moving. Naomi, a woman broken by loss, her husband and sons taken from her, found herself adrift in a foreign land, a widow in despair. Her return to Bethlehem was not marked by triumph, but by a profound sense of emptiness, so much so that she implored her people to call her Mara, for the Almighty had dealt her a bitter blow. Yet, it was in this very desolation that the seeds of providence were sown. Her daughter-in-law, Ruth, a Moabite woman by birth, chose to cleave to Naomi with a loyalty that transcended cultural barriers and personal grief. Ruth's declaration, "Do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you. For where you go I will go, and where you lodge I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die I will die, and there will I be buried. May the Lord do so to me and more also if anything but death parts me from you." Ruth 1:16-17 is a testament to a faith that was not inherited, but deeply chosen and fiercely embraced. This unwavering commitment, born out of love and loyalty, was the very catalyst for a miraculous turn of events. Through Ruth's diligence in the fields of Boaz, a wealthy kinsman of Naomi's late husband, and Boaz's own adherence to the ancient laws of kinship and redemption, a new lineage was established. Ruth, the foreigner, became the mother of Obed, who would father Jesse, the father of David, the lineage from which both the earthly kingdom of Israel and, ultimately, the Messiah would descend. Naomi, who had returned with nothing but sorrow, found her life renewed, her arms filled with a grandson, a symbol of hope and continuity. The subtle hand of God is evident here, transforming personal tragedy into a divine tapestry of redemption. Naomi's bitter journey became the unlikely conduit for the perpetuation of God's covenant promises, a stark reminder that even in our deepest valleys, providence can be at work, preparing the ground for future blessings. The resilience and faith demonstrated by Naomi and Ruth find a powerful echo in the life of Deborah, the prophetess and judge whose leadership revitalized a nation. In an era when Israel groaned under the brutal oppression of Jabin, king of Canaan, and his fearsome general, Sisera, it was Deborah, a woman, who rose to meet the challenge. Her position as a judge, dispensing justice under the shade of a palm tree, was itself a testament to her divine appointment. But her true strength lay in her prophetic insight and her unwavering obedience to God's call. When God commanded her to rally Barak and lead the Israelites against their oppressors, Deborah did not shrink from the task. Her encounter with Barak, where he confessed his fear and insisted on her presence for courage, further illuminates the divine strategy. Deborah's response, "I will surely go with you, yet the glory shall not be yours on the journey that you are taking, for the Lord will sell Sisera into the hand of a woman." Judges 4:9 is a prophetic declaration that foreshadowed not only victory but the particular way in which it would be achieved. This prophecy underscores the idea that God often chooses instruments that defy human expectation. Deborah, through her spiritual authority and unwavering conviction, galvanized the dispirited Israelite forces. The ensuing victory, facilitated by a sudden, torrential downpour that rendered Sisera's iron chariots useless, was a clear demonstration of divine intervention. But the ultimate fulfillment of Deborah's prophecy, the decisive blow against Sisera, was delivered by Jael, another woman, who, with remarkable courage and cunning, killed the fleeing general as he sought refuge in her tent. Thus, from the battlefield led by Deborah, to the strategic act of Jael, God's plan unfolded, ensuring that the deliverance of Israel was marked by a profound demonstration of his power working through, and on behalf of, his chosen people, and specifically highlighting the capacity of women to be instruments of his will in ways that defied conventional understanding. The interconnectedness of these narratives reveals a profound truth about the unfolding of God's plan. It was not a series of isolated incidents, but a continuous thread of divine guidance and human response. Esther's rise to power in Persia, though separated by centuries from the events in Canaan and the fields of Bethlehem, was not a random occurrence. Her people's survival, and indeed their future existence, depended on the very covenant promises that were re-established through Ruth's loyalty and Naomi's perseverance. And the deliverance orchestrated by Deborah and Jael served as a reminder that God's protection over Israel was not a one-time event, but an ongoing assurance, his power manifesting in different ways to sustain his people through every trial. Each woman, in her own context, faced unique challenges, yet their responses shared a common foundation, an underlying faith that acknowledged a power greater than themselves. Naomi, stripped of her family, chose to trust in the God of Israel, a faith that ultimately blossomed into generational blessings. Ruth, a foreigner, embraced this faith with an intensity that secured her place in the lineage of kings. Deborah, a woman in a patriarchal society, stepped into a role of leadership with divine authority, guiding her nation to freedom. And Esther, facing a genocidal plot, risked everything, trusting that her position as queen was part of a divine design to save her people. These stories, when viewed together, demonstrate that providence is not about predetermined outcomes in a fatalistic sense, but about God's active involvement in human history, working through the choices and faith of individuals to achieve his purposes. The subtle ways in which God's hand can be seen at work are particularly striking. In Esther's story, it is the sleeplessness of the king that leads to the reading of the records, uncovering Haman's unrewarded service and Mordecai's loyalty, ultimately exposing Haman's treachery. For Ruth and Naomi, it is the seemingly chance encounter in the barley fields that sets in motion the path to redemption and a renewed legacy. And for Israel, it is the strategic brilliance of Deborah coupled with the unexpected intervention of a storm and the decisive act of Jael, all converging to bring about a swift and complete deliverance. These are not mere coincidences, they are the intricate workings of providence, where every element, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, plays a vital role in the grander narrative. The legacy of these women, therefore, is not confined to their individual achievements but lies in their collective testimony to the enduring power of faith and the unwavering faithfulness of God. They remind us that even in the face of overwhelming odds, when human strength falters and despair looms, a steadfast trust in God can lead to extraordinary outcomes. Their stories are not just ancient history, they are living testaments, whispering across the ages, that the same God who guided Naomi, Ruth, Deborah, and Esther continues to weave threads of providence through the lives of his people today, calling ordinary individuals to extraordinary purposes, and demonstrating that his love and power are as active and present now as they were in those foundational times. The echoes of their faith resonate through time, a constant reminder that in every season of life, whether marked by loss, oppression, or peril, the divine hand is at work, guiding, protecting, and ultimately, redeeming. The stories of Naomi, Ruth, Deborah, and Esther are not relics of a bygone era, confined to the dusty scrolls of antiquity. They are living testaments, their voices carrying across millennia to speak directly to our hearts in the clamor and complexity of the 21st century. We, too, navigate landscapes of loss and uncertainty. We, too, grapple with societal pressures and the temptation to succumb to despair. And we, too, are called to moments of courageous faith, to embrace divine purpose even when the path ahead is shrouded in fog. Consider the modern-day Naomi. She might be a woman widowed too soon, facing the daunting prospect of single parenthood, her carefully constructed world shattered by an unforeseen blow. The bitterness she feels, the cry of Mara, is a raw, visceral echo of Naomi's own lament. Yet, as she looks at her children, or perhaps at a supportive community, she can choose to find a sliver of hope. She can choose, as Ruth did, to cleave to the enduring promises of a faithful God, to seek sustenance not just in earthly provisions but in the unwavering love that transcends circumstance. Her fields might be her career, her family life, or her spiritual disciplines, where diligence and a commitment to higher principles can yield unexpected harvests of resilience and renewal. The divine providence that guided Ruth to Boaz's fields is not a relic of the past. It is present in the serendipitous encounters, the unexpected opportunities, and the quiet nudges of conscience that lead us toward paths of redemption and purpose. And what of the contemporary Ruth? She may be a young person forging her own identity in a world that often pressures conformity, or an individual choosing to stand by a struggling loved one, demonstrating a loyalty that defies societal norms or personal gain. Her declaration of commitment might be whispered in a prayer, spoken in a vow, or demonstrated through selfless action. Your God will be my God, your people my people. This is the essence of a faith not inherited but chosen, a profound act of the will that aligns oneself with a divine destiny. In a culture that often champions individualism and fleeting connections, the steadfastness of a Ruth is a radical act of love and a powerful testament to the enduring strength found in commitment and shared faith. The opportunities for such loyalty abound, from caring for aging parents to advocating for the marginalized, each act a thread woven into the larger tapestry of God's redemptive work. The spirit of Deborah also calls to us. We live in a time where injustices often seem insurmountable, where voices of oppression can be deafening. We might not be called to lead armies into physical battle, but we are called to be voices for the voiceless, to stand for righteousness, and to discern God's will in complex situations. Deborah's prophetic insight and unwavering courage in the face of a powerful enemy are inspirations for us to cultivate our own spiritual discernment. This means actively listening to God's whispers amidst the noise of the world, seeking wisdom in scripture and prayer, and having the boldness to act on what we know to be true and just, even when it is unpopular or difficult. Whether it is in our homes, our workplaces, our communities, or through public advocacy, each of us can be a Deborah, called to lead, to judge with equity, and to rally others towards righteousness, recognizing that true strength comes not from political power or military might, but from divine empowerment. The subtle, yet potent, intervention of God in the elements, as seen in the storm that aided Israel, reminds us that our actions, when aligned with His will, can be amplified by forces beyond our comprehension. Esther's story resonates with a particular poignancy in our modern era, where individuals often find themselves in positions of influence, however small, and are faced with ethical dilemmas. The temptation to remain silent, to protect oneself, or to avoid conflict is powerful. Yet, Esther's courageous decision to approach the king, knowing the immense personal risk, serves as a potent reminder that sometimes, Our greatest faith is displayed when we step out of our comfort zones and speak truth to power, or act on behalf of those who cannot act for themselves. Her elevation to queen was not merely a matter of personal fortune, it was a divine appointment for a critical moment. Similarly, we must ask ourselves, why have we been placed in our current circumstances? What, such a time as this, has God prepared for us? It might be advocating for a colleague, standing up to a bully, making a difficult ethical choice in business, or even simply offering a word of encouragement to someone in despair. These are not small acts, they are opportunities to embody divine purpose and to make a difference that ripples outward. The very fabric of our societies, our workplaces, and even our families can be transformed when individuals, inspired by Esther's example, choose courage over complacency. The enduring relevance of these women's faith lies in its active, dynamic nature. It was not a passive acceptance of fate, but a responsive engagement with the divine. Naomi's faith evolved from bitter questioning to quiet trust. Ruth's faith was a passionate embrace of a new God and a new people. Deborah's faith was a prophetic voice and a call to action. Esther's faith was a brave gamble for the sake of her people. Each woman, in her own way, demonstrated a profound reliance on God, a belief that He was not distant or indifferent, but intimately involved in the unfolding of human history. This same active faith is what is required of us today. We are called to move beyond mere intellectual assent to religious doctrines and to embody our faith in tangible ways. When faced with adversity, we are not meant to wait passively for a miracle, but to actively seek God's guidance, to walk in obedience, and to trust that He will work through our efforts. The challenges of modern life, the rapid pace of change, the complexities of global interconnectedness, the pervasive influence of secularism, can sometimes make us feel overwhelmed, much like the Israelites under oppression. But just as God heard their cries, He hears ours. And just as He raised up women of extraordinary faith in ancient times, He continues to call ordinary men and women today to extraordinary service. The legacies of Naomi, Ruth, Deborah, and Esther offer a powerful antidote to the cynicism and hopelessness that can so easily permeate our world. They remind us that our circumstances, however challenging, do not define our destiny. It is our response to those circumstances, guided by an unwavering faith in God, that truly shapes our journey. They teach us that love and loyalty can bridge divides, that courage can overcome fear, and that even the most unlikely individuals can be instruments of divine purpose. We are all, in essence, characters in a grand, unfolding narrative, a story in which God is the ultimate author and director. The lives of these women serve as a profound encouragement, a divine whisper across the ages, assuring us that we too can find strength in vulnerability, purpose in adversity, and hope in the midst of despair. They leave us with an undeniable truth, that the God who guided them is the same God who walks with us, His hand unseen but ever present, weaving His perfect will into the fabric of our lives, calling us to a faith that is not merely a relic of the past, but a vibrant, living force for today and for all the days to come. Our legacy, like theirs, will be written not just in the achievements we accomplish, but in the unwavering faith we display, the courage we embody, and the love we extend to a world desperately in need of God's touch. May we, inspired by these ancient echoes, embrace our own divine calling with the same conviction and hope that illuminated their paths. Back matter. The journey of bringing these ancient narratives to life has been a profoundly collaborative and faith-affirming experience. I am deeply indebted to countless individuals who have supported and enriched this endeavor. My gratitude extends to my family, whose unwavering love and patience have been my constant bedrock. Special thanks are due to my mentors and teachers, whose wisdom and guidance in biblical studies and historical interpretation have been invaluable. I also wish to thank the vibrant communities of faith whose shared exploration of Scripture has provided ongoing inspiration and challenge. Finally, I offer my sincere thanks to the reader, for embarking on this exploration of faith and courage alongside me. Adonai, a Hebrew name for God, often translated as Lord. Covenant, a solemn agreement or promise between God and humanity, or between individuals. Diaspora, the dispersion of Jews outside of ancient Israel. Heresy, belief or opinion contrary to orthodox religious doctrine. Kinsman redeemer goal in ancient Israelite law, a male relative with the responsibility to redeem land or a person from debt or servitude. Levirate marriage, a custom whereby a man was obliged to marry his deceased brother's widow. Mesopotamia, a historical region in Western Asia situated within the Fertile Crescent, between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Pharisees, a prominent sect of Jews in the 1st century AD who observed the law of Moses strictly. Prophet, a person who speaks for God or a deity. Sheol, the underworld or realm of the dead in ancient Hebrew tradition. Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, comprising the Torah, Law, Nevi'im, Prophets, and Ketuvim, writings. Torah, the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible, also known as the Pentateuch, the Book of Ruth, the Book of Esther, the Book of Judges. Michael Neill is a seasoned scholar of ancient biblical texts and a passionate storyteller with a gift for weaving historical accuracy with compelling narrative. Holding degrees in religious studies and creative writing, Michael Neill has spent years immersed in the rich tapestry of early Judean history and the profound wisdom of its scriptures. His work is characterized by a deep respect for the original context of the texts, coupled with a vibrant imagination that breathes life into timeless characters and their enduring messages. Michael Neill believes that the stories of faith and resilience found in the Bible are not confined to antiquity but offer vital guidance and profound encouragement for contemporary life. This book is the culmination of years of dedicated research, prayerful contemplation, and a heartfelt desire to connect readers with the powerful legacies of women who shaped history through their faith.